Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Leiden. My name is Michael Raumen. I'm the Executive Director of Leiden400. This is Marlijn Kok, and she's the project lead of Leiden400. It'll be my absolute honor to be with you for the next couple of hours while we have this wonderful tour through our city. What is Leiden400? It's an initiative to commemorate the sailing of the Mayflower 400 years ago, a local initiative here in this city, started by a couple of institutions. Pieterskerk Leiden, that's the St. Peter's Church. Erfgoed Leiden, which is Leiden Heritage. Then there's the City Museum, Museum de Lakenhal, and there's Leiden Marketing, which we in Netherlands call Leiden Marketing. Together with the support of the city and support of the national government, we made a whole program for the last couple of years. A program with education, with arts and culture, with tourism, with the social programming, with sports, anything you can think of, with a lot of partners in the Netherlands, in Delfshaven, in Leiden, in the UK, and in the US. Now, before we're going to talk about what we're going to do today, I wanted to share with you quickly why we think this is such an important story here in this city, and the reason why we decided to join into the international commemoration, because we all know the Pilgrims were English, and they ended up in America, but they lived in Leiden for 12 years. There's 3 reasons why we thought it would be important to join in this international commemoration. For the first reason is that this is a very unique commemoration, because it's a world-famous story, and we have our local history that's tied into it. One chapter of this world-famous story is a Leiden chapter, and you'll know a lot about this local story. When we finish this 4 hours, you'll meet Rembrandt and the first cultivator of tulips, Clusius, all these famous scholars that were at the university. You'll really understand why the Pilgrim story, this major world-renowned story, is also very important for this little community here in the center of the Netherlands. The second reason is it's a very urgent commemoration, because it's the first time ever that we also shine a light on the native perspective, because the successful colony in Plymouth and the subsequent successful waves of colonization from Europe to America also meant devastating consequences for the indigenous people of America. And we are very proud that this year, for the first time, we hold a 4-nation commemoration with the Netherlands, the UK, the US, and also the Wampanoag Nation. The third reason why we think this is such an important international commemoration to be joining in is that this is a very relevant commemoration. Because ultimately, you can look at history and see the facts and figures, but it's more than that. We are dealing with themes that still resonate today: freedom, oppression, migration. And it is exactly the reason why I'm so proud that all of these wonderful people and institutions in Leiden made programming that took the history and made it relevant in this day and age, so that we might inspire current generations and maybe even future generations with the lessons learned from our collective history. So this is the reason why we started to make this program for a couple of years, and then on the 31st of March we were supposed to open physically, and then the pandemic happened, the global pandemic. And so this is why 2 months later you are now with us digitally. You are now with us from your homes, and I can tell you one thing: we would have been able to host about 500 people in the museum. Maximum 500 people, but we already know for a fact, while I'm talking for 5 minutes, there's thousands and thousands of people watching in the Netherlands, in the UK, in the US. We have general audience, we have Mayflower descendants, we have people from the Wampanoag Nation looking, we have councillors from the UK watching, we have politicians from the US watching, people from embassies, our sponsors, our partners, everybody tuning in. So it is our absolute honor to be there with you collectively in these times of isolation. Well, you'll be seeing more of me for the next couple of 4 hours, and I'll be here smiling and waving and asking occasional dumb questions to the experts we're about to meet. But actually, this opening was the idea of this wonderful person next to me. I cannot hug her, I wish I could, but if you hear people shouting 1,5 meter, that's the equivalent of the 6 feet in the UK and the US. Marlijn, thank you so much for organizing this, and maybe you can tell our dear viewers what we're going to do today.
Yeah. Hi. Nice to know you. Nice to get to know you. What we're going to do the next few hours is we will be starting at Museum de Volkenkunde. And then we will go to Museum de Lakenhal. And the curators of both museums, they will tell you everything about their exhibition. And in about 1.5 hours, we will be going to the city, to the historical city center of Leiden. And we will be passing all these pilgrim-related locations, and the Leiden American Pilgrim Museum, and the Pieterskerk, and the Jean Pesijn Courtyard, where the pilgrims used to live, and the Botanical Gardens. And we end our fabulous trip at Heritage Leiden, where we can go to the Ancestor booth and visit the Pilgrim archives. And so this is the tour for the next 4 hours. Well, 3 hours and 50 minutes, I believe now. Around 8 o'clock here in the evening, so it must be 2 o'clock in America, we'll be ending our tour. And I'm going to show you how it's done, because we have 2 golf carts. Can one of the 2 cameras take a quick look of the golf carts? Yeah, you're going to look at the golf carts? Yes, great. So these are the 2 assistants of the golf carts, and we have 2 cameras. And the 2 cameras will be following me and Michael all the way along. And we will be showing you everything. And we will be hosted and accompanied by our great guest, Marieke Hoogduin. And Marieke is our art historian and city guide. And she knows everything about Leiden and the history and Rembrandt van Rijn. You do, right?
Thank you so much, Marlene. Yes, I hope so.
So, Michael, if you will join Marieke, I will go behind the cameras.
Thank you. Maybe it's nice to say that, by the way, this is all live, so if it comes across a bit messy or somebody runs out of the screen because they need to pee, that's all part of what we're doing here. One thing, people can go on live and ask questions, right?
Thank you so much.
We have backup,
yes.
yeah.
What we did is, thank you so much for reminding me. There is Suzanne Suer. She works for Heritage Leiden, and she will be screening all questions. So if you have a pilgrim-related question about the pilgrims in Leiden, Leiden Pilgrim, you can go to the Facebook site Mayflower 400 NL. There will be Suzanne, she'll be behind the laptop or computer, and she will be answering all these questions. And we also have my colleague, Luc. And Luc will be answering all the questions that Marieke doesn't have an answer to. So if you have any questions, go to the Facebook site of Mayflower 400 NL, and hopefully questions can be answered. That's it, I think, for now.
Right. I think we should get started.
Yeah, enjoy.
So,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This takes a bit used to, Marieke.
Hi, Michael.
So wonderful you're with us. We have a map of Leiden.
Yes.
We thought it would be a nice place to begin.
Yes.
Let's wait for the camera to be here. So this is, the station is there. We're now at the Museum for World Cultures. This is a modern day map. Now let's jump back in time, 400 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. Was this similar? How did the map look, the map of Leiden at that time? Was it quite similar?
Well, if we're talking about the time of the pilgrims,
yes.
So when the pilgrims arrived in 1609, the city was a little bit smaller. If we look at the map now, we are standing right here where you see the dot on the map. The central station is over there. So in 1609, when the pilgrims arrived, it was more or less the same town, except it was smaller. So if we look at the town now, we see that it is surrounded by a waterway, which we call the Singel. It surrounds the whole town, but in the time of the pilgrims, it was restricted to this part. So the oldest part of Leiden is right here in the middle, in between the 2 arms of the river, the Rijn. And where they meet, the old and the new Rijn, oud and the new Rijn, right here, Leiden was in 800 got a fortress on an artificial hill, and then it began to grow very slowly.
Yeah.
In the Middle Ages, it was more or less this part.
Okay.
So here in between, and then later on, it was extended with the other part. So when the pilgrims arrived, where we are standing now, this part was not there yet. So there is an old map that can be shown by Peter Bast, and that's the map from 1600. So people at home now can see the map,
I hope. People can see this map now.
And there they see that this part was not yet there.
Okay.
That was the extension of 1611. And it
Okay,
was,
so the north side of the city was
yeah,
missing, if you will.
exactly.
Okay.
And it had to be extended because so many people came to Leiden at the end of the 16th century.
Yeah.
After the siege and the relief of Leiden. Many refugees, economic refugees, religious refugees came to live in Leiden.
Yeah.
And the town really became too small, so it had to be extended.
Because of the enormous influx of economic and religious refugees.
Right.
Because this is true, right? The pilgrims, they didn't end up in Cologne or Antwerp. They ended up in Leiden for good reason.
Yes.
Right? Leiden actively promoted itself as a city of refugees.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's true, because we had a freedom of religion after the Reformation, but we also had a large textile industry,
Yeah.
and we needed a lot of workers.
Yeah.
So we even know that the Secretary of Town, Jan van Hout, went over to England and to other countries to promote that we had to have.
So he was
economic-
basically saying,
yeah,
come to Leiden and you
Exactly.
can believe what you want to believe.
Yes.
But you got to work, though.
And we
so
have
it's kind of pragmatic tolerance.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
okay.
Yes. And
Interesting. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
We
this
will
was a
see
good,
more of this,
good introduction. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll come back to this.
Thank you.
We'll walk now to the Museum of World Cultures, where...
Sorry.
Sorry, yeah. This takes getting used to,
Yeah.
but we'll get there. We'll show a wonderful exhibit, but while we have the walk, we'll talk to the curator there. I think it would be nice to show a clip by Michelle Pecoraro. She's our colleague, executive director of Plymouth 400, and she left a message for us and for all of our viewers. So maybe it'd be nice to show a bit of Michelle. Marlijn, can we?
I will never forget my first trip to Leiden. I remember the feeling I got as I walked into the square where the Pieterskerk church still stands, just as it did when a young William Bradford walked those cobbled streets. It was then that I truly recognized the global impact of the Mayflower voyage and the commitment of the English pilgrims who embarked upon this fantastic and treacherous journey. It was then that I knew just how many lives had been touched by this history. We came together, 4 nations with a shared history: Dutch, English, Wampanoag, and American. Our partnerships have grown to include a greater understanding of the motivations and actions that had both successful and disastrous consequences. I'm grateful that our Dutch and English colleagues were so open to the indigenous part of the story, a chapter they would not have known about without our 4-nation commemoration. We are all enriched by these collaborations in ways that far exceed any single event that we all had planned. The fruits of our partnerships include educational collaborations, shared museum collections, community connections, business opportunities. This is the gift that will keep on giving after we have moved past this anniversary. It fills me with gratitude when I think about the extraordinary commitment of people worldwide to make this 400th anniversary a meaningful moment for all. This pandemic will pass, and we will have our events. But I am most proud of the relationships that we have all forged and the legacies that are born of our efforts. In the wake of the worst worldwide disaster of our lifetime, our collective accomplishments outshine any single event. Thank you, Leiden. Much love from Plymouth, Massachusetts.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for those warm words. And I know you're watching. It's great to have you with us. And it's bizarre to have worked so hard those 4 years, but now finally we can have a sense of being together with everybody involved. We're now at the National Museum of World Cultures. As you may or may not know, Leiden has some city museums, obviously, but a lot of national museums, a lot of Dutch national museums are based in Leiden. And World Cultures, we had a very interesting conversation with the director 3 years ago. We said, look, this is, apologies for all the sirens, this is a very interesting year coming up. Is there something that you as a museum would like to share with us? And they thought about it and they said, maybe we shouldn't do a traditional exhibit based on our own collection, but we will make something with contemporary native artists to ask them, on the basis of our collection, to shed their light on the consequences that this journey had for their community. So we're here now at the National Museum talking to Liesbeth Ouwehand, curator. Liesbeth, hi.
Oh, welcome.
So wonderful to meet you. Cannot shake hands, but okay, we're here standing in front of an incredibly colorful mural. Can you tell us something about this and about the exhibit that you guys have planned for the commemorative year?
Yes, well, this mural is made by Jattika Starfields, and he was a artist in resident last year, and he prepared this mural especially for this exhibition. And I would also like to welcome you to Museum Volkenkunde, which is part of the National Museum of World Cultures, and Leiden is actually the headquarters of the National Museum of World Culture. And this is the oldest museum of the National Museum of World Cultures, and it was founded in 1837. And the oldest collection came in through King William I, which was in a part of the Royal Cabinet of Curiosities. We moved to this building in 1935, and it's the former University Hospital. And, well, I can tell you something about the exhibition, if you would like.
That would be lovely, yes.
Well, the commemoration year was for us an excellent chance to tell stories about indigenous North America. And that's what we decided to do. And we're with the exhibition called First Americans, we're talking about the resilience and creativity of indigenous North America. And we want to tell stories which are about contemporary indigenous life. Mm-hmm. And this exhibition also gave us the opportunity to talk and to work with contemporary artists. Like Jattika Starfields, which is a very nice example. And we've also acquired some photographs for the exhibition. We will also show video work, for example, by the Mohawk artist Skawinati.
Okay.
And, well, I can tell you something also about a photograph, which I think will be shown to the audience as well. Which one? The History of the World by Shelley Nero.
Yeah. All right.
Yes. Well, it's made by the Mohawk artist Shelley Nero. And she works in a wide variety of mediums. But we decided we wanted to show a history of the world, which is a very important piece. It's 4 very large oblong photographs. And they actually talk about the political and difficult issues around treaties and access to land. And government treaties that were broken, and indigenous nations losing access to their land. While on the other hand, reliance on land and having access to land is very important to them. It's part of their indigenous philosophy. So what we see actually in the photograph, we see in the so-called Indian head nickel and a buffalo, and in all photographs we see land, air and water. And Shelley Nero uses these very strong symbols to call attention to the indigenous nations and the continuous pressure under which their land actually is. And each photograph, they have a different frame, and the audience will see the red one. And there's also a yellow one, and the one with a white, and the one with a black frame. Yeah. And these colors, they refer to the sacred directions. And it's an important part of Lakota culture, but also other indigenous communities have adopted these colors just to show unity and nationalism.
Another really striking work that I saw was the work by Cara Romero.
Yeah.
Can you tell us something about that? I also think we have a photo of that.
Yes, that's also a very important work. She's called Julia. And Cara Romero is a Chihuahua photographer. And she was very generous to give us permission to use Julia. as a exhibition poster as well. In the exhibition we will show 3 photographs of 3 different women, and they're all standing in a box. And Caro Romero shows the cultural diversity of indigenous North America. And Julia is also, it's a very important piece. We see a very confident woman wearing traditional regalia, and she's surrounded by objects that are very important to her, like basketry that came from her grandmother, and a drum which belongs to her great uncle. So it's a piece that tells us something about self-representation. So that's also very important. Yeah, and what's also interesting to know, I think, that is the border of the box where she stands in. You see a design which refers to the Rocky Mountains beeweed, and we also see that in Courtyard pottery. So that's also something that the people will see in the exhibition. Yeah.
About the exhibition, when will it open? Because these are crazy times, of course. Do you guys have any sense on when you can open, when people can actually come and see the exhibition? This mainly goes for people in Holland, obviously.
Yes. Well, the exhibition will open on the 10th of July for the general public. And the exhibition will last for a year. So hopefully, maybe in the near future, or maybe a little bit further away, people from abroad will also be able to come and visit.
News.
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks for now. I think we have a video by Henrietta Litchi, the chief curator of the exhibit, and I think we can play her while we, because we have 4 hours to cover the entire city of Leiden. You understand? Thank you so much for this information, and we'll get going to the next location while we can see Henrietta tell a bit more about these exhibit. But for now, Lisbeth, thank you so much, and I can't wait for the 10th of July to come and visit.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Hello, my name is Henrietta Litchi. I'm the Chief Curator at the National Museum of World Cultures in the Netherlands. Confusingly, I'm speaking to you from my home in Edinburgh, where I'm with my family, staying safe. I hope you're with your family and also staying safe so that we can all be safe. My purpose this afternoon is to talk to you about the exhibition First Americans, which is going to open on the 9th of July at Museum Volkenkunde in Leiden. When Leiden400 approached us to be part of their commemoration of 1620, we responded with enthusiasm. For us, it was an opportunity to combine our existing collections and to think about the new works we wanted to put in the collection. We are a museum about people seen through objects, and this was an important opportunity for us to think about what we would like to say about First Americans, about the resilience of Indigenous people, about the strength of Indigenous communities, about the vibrance and importance of Indigenous artistic expressions from the past to the present. First Americans, we hope, is a means of understanding the past, of thinking about the present, and thinking also about how we feel about the future together. Of course, the Dutch nation was part of the colonial enterprise which happened on American soil. And so some of the earliest items in our collections come from the 17th century. Yes, one of the first things you'll see in the exhibition is a boar-headed club, collected, we think, in 1670 in Upper New York State on the Hudson River, and is possibly Haudenosaunee. It came through the possession of Reverend Hermanus Bloom. It's a part of a collection of material that we'll put on display from the northeast of North America that look at war and alliances and the thirst for curiosities that happened in Europe. But the subtitle of the exhibition is Honouring Indigenous Resilience and Creativity. And honouring is a really important aspect of this exhibition. In the exhibition, we will feature individuals that may not be familiar to our visitors, individuals such as the Hopi educator and painter Fred Cabote, individuals such as the San Ildefonso painter and jeweller Awitsira, Their work will be combined with work by children, collected by a Dutch educator and educational psychologist who went round the Southwest in the mid-20th century and collected children's drawings. So alongside Caboti and Sira's representation of ceremonial Pueblo life, we'll put representations of the everyday done by small children in the mid-20th century. A luminary of Native American history is Jim Thorpe, the sack and fox athlete who won Olympic gold medals in 1912, the first Indigenous athlete to do so. He was a basketball player, he was a football player, he was a baseball player, he was one of the greatest athletes in American history. He was also a boarder at the Carlisle Industrial School, where he was part of the football team. And that football team beat every elite team on the college football circuit in the early 20th century and raised American football to the sport we recognise today. So in the exhibition, we feature a work, a collaborative print made by Mishobda Maidu printmaker, Jacob Meaders, and Seneca Cayuga Cherokee artist Jameson Chaz Banks, to honour Jim Thorpe, but also to put that print alongside a lacrosse stick that belongs to another athlete in the 21st century called Nina Polk, a Navajo Lakota lacrosse player. We're looking at questions of resilience and resistance, and an important person representing a sort of post-apocalyptic world is the artist Virgil Ortiz. Virgil Ortiz is a ceramicist who comes from Cochiti Pueblo, comes from a long line of ceramicists. And his work is traditional in form and in technique, using native clay, using natural paints made out of Rocky Mountain beeweed and some traditional symbols. But what it represents is something called a Venusian soldier. A soldier in a post-apocalyptic time wearing a gas mask, something that is perhaps closer to us or more recognisable to us now than it was when the museum bought this piece late last year. No exhibition that looks at 1620 would really be complete without addressing the issue of wampum. Wampum beads, wampum regalia, the ceremonial importance of a bead made of the shell of the quahog clam that's harvested along the Atlantic coast in North America. We have an early belt from the 1800s, and we wanted to commission a new work, and we asked Elizabeth James Perry. Elizabeth James Perry is a regalia maker and a marine biologist, and she belongs to the Wampanoag tribe of Gay Head. She knows an enormous amount about her tribe's history and Indigenous history more generally. The belt she made is called Out of the Ocean. The Wampanoag people are the people of the first light, and her reflection is the play of light of the moon and the sun on the ocean. Her belt reflects history. It looks at European understandings of Indigenous people through an object that they thought they understood. It also reflects Indigenous concepts of itself, of themselves, through regalia, through because wampum was used in all sorts of different ways and is used in all sorts of different ways. It also represents the future. The acidification of the oceans have an impact on the quahog clan. The exhibition features about 80 works. About half of those were produced by contemporary artists, living artists, 20 of them. 20 of the artists represented are living artists, and they span a number of different media. They span ceramic, jewellery, paintings, prints, photography, and possibly lastly, fashion. Jamie Akuma is a Louisiana Shoshone Bannock bead artist, and she also makes ready-to-wear and fashion items. And in the exhibition, we look at the continuity of Indigenous aesthetics and its combination with urban and contemporary life. And one of the ways we do that is through Jamie Akuma's work, as we dress a full figure in all of the elements of her work: a hat, a scarf, a pair of shoes, a beaded bomber jacket, and a pair of leggings. I hope you will very much enjoy First Americans.
Als een pro. Ja? Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see, pretty Dutch site at the moment. It's quite busy. We're here at the market. Normally that's in the city center. I think for the first time in 600 years it's
yes.
not. Yeah, exactly. So it's a bit crowded here. But we are here for a very good reason. Marieke, why are we here? This place, what did it mean for this period of the Pilgrims?
Yes, we're looking at the windmill De Valk, which is a museum right now. But in the time that the Pilgrims arrived in Leiden, they came from the northeast. So they must have seen the town surrounded by a city wall and a lot of windmills on the city walls. They had around 19 windmills in that time on the city wall surrounding Leiden. So there is a very nice painting of Jan van Gooien, which is in the collection of the Lakenhal.
Yeah.
And that shows exactly what the Pilgrims must have seen when they arrived in Leiden.
And Jan van Gooien, very famous painter, also from Leiden, right?
From Leiden, yes, very famous.
Yeah, we're quite proud of that. So the mill, it was already here when the Pilgrims were here? This particular mill was here?
Not this windmill.
Okay.
It was exact on that location, but it looked a little bit different.
Okay.
It was smaller. In 1611 there was the first one. Then there was a second one somewhat later in the 17th century. And this one dates from the 18th century.
Okay.
So it's called a stellingmolen in Dutch.
Yeah.
And it means that it's a high windmill to catch the wind, and underneath the windmill there is the house of the miller, where the miller could live.
I think we also have an old drawing, 4.2, where you can see the mill and the defense wall. I think that'd be nice to show people so they have kind of an idea how it looked.
Yeah.
You mentioned Jan van Gooien and the Lakenhal. This is where we're going to go next, to Museum de Lakenhal, which is a stone throw away from this, the Beestermarkt, which is the animal market, right? What was the Beestermarkt? Was it really where the market was where they sold animals?
Yes, they did. This was meant for the lambs.
Okay, the lambs.
And then the other part was meant for the cattle.
Okay.
And it lasted until the 1960s, the cattle market in the city center.
Okay.
So every week there must have been noise of all animals going around and farmers selling them, yelling and drinking too much. So they had to ring the bell before the market started. Otherwise, those farmers would be in the pubs and no market at all.
Yeah, exactly. And this is quite a new area in Leiden, right? Because it's the north. It was bombed during the Second World War. This is why it doesn't look as medieval as we're going to go into now. But that's where we're heading now. So I suggest we walk to Lakenhal. In the meantime, maybe it'd be nice to hear from somebody else again. Paula Peters. She is the coordinator on behalf of the Wampanoag. And she was our colleague and partner for the last 3-4 years when it came to making programming and understanding more about the Wampanoag and the Wampanoag community. So it'd be nice to hear from her. And in the meantime, we'll go walk and try not to get hit by all these bikes.
Hi, my name is Paula Peters. I am a member of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe and a member of the Wampanoag Advisory Committee to the Mayflower Commemoration. I come to you from my home in Mashpee, Massachusetts, without the benefit of a haircut for more than 2 months. But I'm prepared to read you a statement about our participation. For hundreds of years, the Pilgrim story has been told with little or no acknowledgement of the Wampanoag sacrifice. Our story is one that has been marginalized and misinterpreted in favor of a romanticized version of colonization. Colonization, the word itself, has an underlying meaning for indigenous people around the world. It has rarely occurred in a way that has tolerance for those who are colonized, and more often has resulted in their oppression, their forced assimilation, and even death. Past commemorations of the historic voyage of the Mayflower recognize the Wampanoag as a mere backdrop to the overarching Pilgrim experience. 50 years ago, that indifference resulted in a national movement of activism by Native American tribes from across this country. We demanded to be recognized historically, culturally, and as vital sovereign peoples. That I can address you today as a member of the Wampanoag Nation and a full partner to this commemoration is a significant milestone. But it is not just for the Wampanoag that this needs to be appreciated, because the inclusion of the Wampanoag story means that we tell the full story, and it is the Wampanoag story told in our own voice. That will lend balance to our history and inform the future. As a member of the Wampanoag Advisory Committee, I can tell you that we are disappointed that many of the plans and events have been postponed. I was particularly looking forward to spending some time on a houseboat in Leiden and getting to know all of you on a much more personal level. But the 400th anniversary need not be confined to 2020 as we are confined to our homes. I look forward to many online experiences as well as a time when we can safely come together to reflect on this very important history. Thank you.
Sorry? All right. We have arrived at Museum de Lakenhal. I think, there is Jori. Come on in. Jori, great to meet you. Great to be here. Wonderful. It's what a privilege to be in a completely empty museum.
Yes.
This is one of my dreams. So we get the VIP treatment today.
You got it. Yeah.
I mean, tell us something. Tell us anything.
Everything. Okay,
everything.
I will tell you. First of all, I'm very happy that you're here, of course. It's good because it's sad that we're closed during.
Of course, yes.
But at the moment, you are in the Cloth Hall, the 17th century Cloth Hall. And it's really a temple for controlling and governing the textile industry during the 17th century. And from the outside, you can really see what was happening inside this building during the 17th century, before it was a museum, of course.
Yeah.
And in the middle, you see three men checking, inspecting the cloths. And cloths, I don't know, did Marieke already explain what's
Not so much.
Okay,
no.
it's a woolen fabric. It's a bit like your coat.
I dressed accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. And it was a very expensive fabric in the 17th century, and Leiden was the biggest industry of Europe where cloth was made. So it was already an industry of where million guilders were earned.
Yeah.
And because that it was so expensive, it had to be checked every time. It was a home industry.
It's a sort of quality control.
A quality control. It was a home industry. People were working at home, so they were spinning, wool combing, sorting, weaving, dyeing, and that's what you see outside on this building. So on the left you see spinning, spinning the wool. And on the next plaquette, you can see how two weavers are sitting at a loom and weaving this fabric. The middle, I already told you, that is where what's happened inside this building. And then on the other side, you see how the fabric is really shaving. Was shaved because it had to be very thin and lots of souplesse had to be in there. And on the right side, you see the dyeing of the fabric. It was done with indigo or cochinille. It was also very expensive process.
Expensive,
yes,
course,
it was. So
yes.
not everyone could afford this fine cloth. Actually, the Pilgrims, they couldn't afford it, so they had to work
they worked
in this industry.
So we see the entire value chain, if you will. They worked in it. They were the hands, but they could never afford themselves.
No.
They were cheap labor, basically.
Indeed, yes. So 80% of the fabric was going all over the world. It was exported because, of course, during this time, this golden age, there was Dutch primacy of world trade, and especially this cloth was very wanted also abroad. So it's. Here we are.
Here we are, an empty museum.
Yes, in an empty museum. Yes, and because it became a museum in 1874, a museum of fine arts.
Yes.
And, also of history, of course, and arts and crafts. And we do have some Rembrandts here and other paintings from the 17th century, like Jan Steen and Jan Lievens. So I think it's.
And for this commemorative year, because Lakenhal, of course, is one of the founders of Leiden400, one of the initiators, if you will, a couple of years ago. You said it's very important, it's crucial that we partake as a city of Leiden in this international commemoration.
Yes.
So you also made this entire exhibit, right, about the Pilgrims. And this is what we're going to see today.
Yes, we're going to see the exhibit.
Exactly, and nobody else has seen this, right? This
it's and actually we're still installing it. So
you're still installing.
Wow. So don't look at the mess. But it's. Well, I think for more than quarter it's ready, and it's Pilgrims to America and the limits of freedom. Of course, it's. The exhibition, we go through the same worlds as the Pilgrims went. So it's a journey.
Yeah.
And it starts in what we called an old world. It's England, which they had to flee from.
Yes.
Then we go to an open world. We'll just walk through it.
Yeah.
And this is the world of Leiden, where there was much tolerance at that time. Then we'll go to what was for the Pilgrims a new world. We follow them when they enter the Speedwell and the Mayflower, of course, later on. And then we come in a colonized world, of course, where everything altered for the Native Americans, but for the Pilgrims as well, of course. So let's
go through it.
Have a look. Here on your left, you see King James I. He's, of course, the king, the guy where they were fleeing from, because he was head of state, but also head of church. And the Pilgrims, couldn't accept his authority because he wanted them to believe what he believed, and they felt they have their own connection with God, and that they could know what God wanted through the Bible, the Geneva Bible. So. King James became angry, of course, because his authority wasn't recognized. So then.
So they were persecuted.
They were persecuted,
right?
indeed. And this is a quote from King James, and I will make them confirm themselves, or else I will harry them out of the land, or else do worse. And. So it was for the Pilgrims. They had to decide to leave. To flee.
Leave, exactly, or face the consequences. Some of them did. I think some of them were imprisoned in Boston, England. Boston,
yes,
England.
yes. They were actually many were imprisoned, but later when they came out of prison, then immediately they fled.
They left, right? They fled. I think.
Yeah, indeed. So it was really dangerous for them in England at the time, and then they came they decided to go to the Netherlands because it was, of course, a Protestant country.
Yeah.
There was no king or queen. It was ruled by the States General and the Stadhouder, King of Maurits, Stadhouder Maurits of Orange, and they knew Holland quite well because William Brewster had been in Holland before on a dip when he was joining the ambassador of England in 1585. And here we see a real large flag of the Armada because, of course, the Dutch and the English were fighting together the Spanish king against the Spanish. And, they defeated this armada, and then this flag was brought in by an officer from Leiden, and he brought it to the Pieterskerk. Kerk. I think you will go there later on.
Yes, we will definitely go there. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's 4 meters high, but it was actually 12 meters long.
Wow.
So and it was hanging in this Pieterskerk, and the pilgrims must have seen it, and it was there like a trophy and against Roman Catholicism. So we felt it was very good to have it on display here. Well, let's walk through it. Here you see Dutch or Delfts wear towels, blue towels, and of course we don't know how the pilgrims looked like. There are no portraits of them, only of Edward Winslow in Plymouth, U.S. So this is all the exhibits that you see are really from the time of the pilgrims, so it's you really can get close to it. It's like an historical sensation.
Yeah, exactly.
And they must have seen those towels, and it's our ordinary people, ordinary men, women, but also children, who went to Leiden, about 100. I think you will go to Heritage Leiden also, won't you?
Yes.
And there you will see the permission that the pilgrims got from in Amsterdam to come to Leiden. So here you see again a quote, John Robertson, it's the Dutch name for John Robinson, who got permission to come with around 100 men and women to Leiden. So let's go to Leiden.
Yes, men and women.
Men and women, yeah.
That's why we say pilgrims and not pilgrim fathers, I understood.
Yes, and children, of course.
Of course, children also.
So it must have been more.
And the children were also working in the cloth industry, right?
Yeah,
That's what
they
we
were
saw.
sorting the wool, and they were helping at home with their mostly the men were weavers and the women were spinning. So yes.
Oh, you're literally still installing.
Yeah,
this
here
is wonderful to see. Yes.
I was hoping you wouldn't look at that.
No, it's great. I mean, what do you want to show us in this?
This is now we are in Leiden. This is this open world where the pilgrims could believe what they wanted. They could gather and have their own religion. And this is the view of Leiden by Jan van Gooyen. And this is what they must have seen when they entered the city from Amsterdam by boat, coming through to Leiden. It's the northeast. And really, this is how it must have been. That they really went on this boat and they arrived. You see the Pieters Church and the Hooglandse Church.
You can still recognize the landmarks.
Yeah.
And it's still quite it's not. We don't have any high rises, so it's quite. You can really recognize it as it is today, right?
Yeah, that's why I like working so much in this city, because it's an open air city.
Yeah,
when you walk through, it's easy to imagine what the pilgrims must have seen. Yes. And they came by boat, and then they really stopped at the center of the city. This is the place where they, what they must have seen at first, and I think you will go there also.
This is where the two Rhines confluence?
Yes, the old and the new Rhine, where they come together, and here you see a market like you must have seen outside when you came over here. Those buildings are still, of course some changed, but most of them are still standing there. And here again, then we have we have beautiful drawings from again this cloth industry where they worked in around 70% of the pilgrims must have done this work. We know that William William Bradford was a weaver, and Samuel Fuller was a weaver, and I think it's all from this time. It's around 1600, and in this museum we have the color paintings from the same burgomaster who made these paintings. It is Isaac Claeszoon van Zwanenburg. And here you can also see, I think, well, but I don't know if you can zoom in, you can also see Jan van Hout, the secretary, who really gave permission to John Robinson to enter the city and to live here, and that they would get protection.
He was a fascinating figure. We always come across him, whether
Jan
we're
van
talking
Hout,
about
yes.
Rembrandt or the university or the Pilgrims. He was
a
in the shadow of the mayors. He was not a man in the foreground. He was also always somewhere in the back, but he was a mastermind.
He must have been very intelligent, and he was was also a very tolerant person. And he realized that we should we should let in as many foreigners as possible to work in this cloth
because
industry.
that will help us to come to fruition as a city.
Indeed, and so.
And it's also true. It's also true that he invited scholars. Right, the university was just founded a couple of years before the Pilgrims arrived. He got scholars in from all over Europe to come to Leiden also. So he really believed in this dynamics of arts and economics and science and.
Yeah, indeed. Yes, he realized what was happening. That really Leiden was booming. That the Dutch Republic was. Was something new. There was nowhere a republic, and that this would bring, lots of trade and prosperity, of course.
Exactly, and at the same time, we also learned that there's children working in cloth industry, cheap labor, people struggling. So that is the other side of it. We like to think of it as the golden age, but then on the other hand, it wasn't so golden for a lot of people, right?
Also, yes. It was a different society, of course. Everyone believed that, God had intentions with you, and that equality, the way we are thinking about liberty, equality, it wasn't existing yet. Of course, it's quite strange to understand for us nowadays.
Exactly. Yeah. But this really helps to be walking through these different worlds as they encounter.
I hope so.
So the next word, or you want to show us more about
maybe
this?
if we do have some time for it, then this, because the Pilgrims were also printing, of course, or at least they were publishing pamphlets against the English king and church, because they were against the hierarchy in the church and the old rituals in the church, and they were smuggling in pamphlets that they were printing here in Leiden. And it was by William Brewster, and he was probably assisted by Edward Winslow and William Brewer, who invested in this business. It was in the home of William Brewster in the Stinksteeg.
Yeah, we're going to go there later.
The
smelly alley.
Yeah, the smelly alley. It was just a small house, so probably only the typesetting was done there, and then it was brought to printers all over Leiden, because Leiden was had many printers because of this university again. But what's interesting, that those pamphlets were smuggled in those barrels. Oh. They had false buttons, and then you put the pamphlets were put in there and then brought over by ship to Scotland and England. So this is what really made the English king furious.
Upset.
We're really very upset, and he was intervening here in the Dutch Republic. So the Pilgrims didn't feel that safe anymore, and it was one of the reasons why they wanted to leave also for the new world.
Because that's interesting. When you read about the Pilgrims, a lot said, well, Netherlands was too tolerant for them, but that's just. If you imagine why you would leave, there's of course also multiple reasons, right?
Yeah, there were many reasons.
So the end of the truce with the Spanish was near, I think, right? So they were not doing so well economically. Is that correct?
No, it was hard work for them, exactly. and they were living on existence level. So, so they really felt they had nothing to lose in a sense. Exactly. But also, there were opportunities. All of a sudden, there were travel journals by John Smith, of course, and why which told them there were opportunities outside and that there was lots of freedom to gain in a new world.
And that brings us to this. Do I dare to start a new life? That's basically what we're talking about.
And not all of the pilgrims dared, of course. So 1/3 of them left, and 2/3 stayed in Leiden.
Yeah, most stayed behind. Also, some of them couldn't afford, of course. A lot of them actually became an indistinguishable part of Leiden community, right?
Yes, they integrated.
We still have pilgrim descendants amongst us.
Yes.
The people don't know that they're even descendant from the pilgrims.
True, yeah. This is about the new world, about the people who decided to start a new life. As you may have noticed, everywhere this reflection house is in the middle of a room. We have 4 of them, and it's the public, the visitors, I hope that they will come in June, have the opportunity to contemplate, to reflect on these questions that are still universal, of course.
Yes.
So what would you do if you had to make this decision in your time? And of course, lots of people have to make these decisions. Should I stay or should I go? Should I flee? Can I be who I am? Your freedom, my freedom. So, but that's here is this what all kind of artifacts that the pilgrims actually took with them to this new world. They had to decide what should we bring with us. Of course, we know that they took the speedwell and later on had to take the Mayflower, and that they couldn't take that much things with them. But from these things, we know that they took that with them, and we see also here. It's very strange, I guess. One of the pilgrims, William Mullins, actually Suzanne Suwer of Heritage Leiden, she's willing to answer questions, I believe.
That's correct.
Online, yeah. So I mention names. So if people want to know more about these pilgrims, then they can ask
her a question.
Suzanne. But William Mullins, he took 80 pairs of shoes with him, and we don't know why he did it. Was it to trade, or was it that he was thinking, well, we're gonna need them? I'm not sure, but that's the reason why you can see shoes here in this showcase. One painting I really would like to show you, which is very special, is the departure of Delfshaven.
Yes.
It's the most interesting painting of this exhibition. It's made in 1620 by Adam Willards. And here you see Delfshaven. It was the harbor of Delft. And it's near Rotterdam, from where they left. And here you can see the speedwell waiting for the pilgrims. And here they are shipped in with this smaller vessel. And these men and women, one of the things that you can see is that they are very well armed. Yes. They have weapons with them. So they knew it was going to be a dangerous journey. They were pirates, so there was a risk. But they were also willing to fight when necessary. Of course, they've had read journals from travelers to the New World who thought there were savages in this country, and that's why we also have this quote of William Bradford, because on the other hand, they were thinking that it was an unpeopled country, it wasn't true.
No, it wasn't true.
And so they brought lots of weapons with them, and what's also very interesting, I think, is that it's quite colorful. Those people aren't wearing those black suits that we are
as you might expect, exactly.
Yes, which has been told in the 19th century that it were really Puritans
the myth of the Puritan,
and in black. But actually, they were quite colorful, wearing suits and dresses. And here you see a lady also. She's wearing having a pike in her hand, And those pikes are still, we do have them in our own collection.
This is from your collection, right?
Yes.
And this painting is from the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, if I understand correctly?
It has been bought by them, yes.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
has been
Just
bought
recently,
in the Netherlands by the museum.
So we actually have the premiere here in Leiden, and afterwards it's going to Boston.
It's going to Boston.
Last time I was there, I was talking with the museum, and they're going to do a day full of education around this painting and about the Leiden time. So it's quite exciting. It's wonderful to see how a piece travels from one country to another, and then highlighting our common history, basically.
It is, yes.
I think Delfshaven might be jealous.
I wouldn't have minded if it would stay here,
I
of
guess,
course, but
guess.
it's
maybe we can throw in a good word for you guys.
Again, you see weapons, helmets, and in the other room you can also see fire weapons, of course, which were brought in by the Pilgrims and were new for the Native Americans, of course.
And it's quite strange because it says in the quote, unpeopled, but yet they brought arms.
Yeah,
they weren't really sure.
I think that's the problem is that they weren't looking at the Native Americans as people. They saw them as savages, as barbarians. Non-Christians. And you know what happens with non-Christians, with barbarians in the Bible. So they were really thinking them as inferior, as wild beasts almost. And they thought that this country was just for the taking. And of course, the coming of the Pilgrims meant a total new world for the Native Americans, and it was the beginning of the end.
Yes, and this is why you decided to have this fourth world.
Really to try to explain, this is the colonized world. It is a world they took from Native Americans. This is what they saw when they entered. You see and of course it took for some months before the Native Americans came. They were watching them all the time, and of course later on this peace treaty came, and that's how they survived. And we do have the animals that were of course were traded, like beavers. The beaver heads were very popular in England, but also in Holland. And it was this one. We do have one on display. It was very fashionable, and around 20,000 beaver heads were sold each year in England.
Because they also had to repay their journey, right?
Yes.
They had investors. They invested in the ship. It was a very expensive undertaking.
Yes.
So they had to make money in what they called the New World in America to be able to pay off their debts, right?
Yes.
And this is one of the
this is how they did it. It's because every head needed 2 beavers.
Oh.
So 20,000 heads only in England means 40,000. The killing of 40,000 beavers a year. So within 50 years, almost, the beavers were also
and this
extinct.
is also what they say, the waves of colonization also decimated local flora and fauna because they really needed to hunt in order to repay their debts.
To hunt, and also fish, dried fish. And at the end you see here the turkey. Of course, the first harvest gotten in 1621 in October, November. And it was celebrated by the Pilgrims. And then also Native Americans came along, the Pokanoket. And they were actually with 90 Native Americans. So there were more Native Americans than Pilgrims. This was celebrated together. And later on in the 19th century, it became a story, a romantic story, that it was really a Thanksgiving. Yeah. And that, you know the story, I guess, about the Pilgrims and really founders of the nation. And that they were, of course, America already existed and was...
Of course. It was really an attempt to make this... origin story, basically.
Yes,
right?
it was the myth of the nation, and here we see it was also again Abraham Lincoln really actualized it, and it's this Thanksgiving idea well, it's of course it's still a huge celebration.
Yeah,
In the,
yeah.
But well, around from the 1970s, it also became a day, a national day of mourning.
Yeah.
And because of Frank James,
Yes.
Wamsuta, who was really having his speech in Plymouth, US, and explaining that it wasn't a feast for everyone, and that it was built also on a massacre and discrimination of Native Americans.
Yes.
So here you can see a speech.
There's a question from the audience.
Oh.
When is the exhibition seen?
It's yes. It's until it will open on June the 2nd, and it will be standing here until September the 12th. So.
All right.
Well, it's a good. I hope so. The people will come and look for themselves. Well, here you, as I told you, there are those reflection rooms, and this is really a corridor where people can reflect again on what liberty is for. How it feels nowadays. What do you think that's liberty? So we have poems here in where people can express their feelings about this, because we're telling, of course, at least we hope that we're telling a new story, not only about this, well, how the nation was founded, but really try to focus on what happened and stay with the facts and ask people to think about it themselves.
Think about the themes of the story,
yes,
not
we
just
want
the
to raise,
literal history.
Yeah, raise questions.
Joey, thank you so much. It's wonderful. I'm looking forward to the
coming.
2nd of June, and we'll be definitely back, and especially all the people that live in Leiden and Netherlands hope we can visit with a lot of people. I think we're going in a train through the museum.
Yeah,
I'm sure you'll find a way.
Yeah, we can go. You can go out here.
Exiting outside. Keep this. Where are we going? Is that something I can ask Marika now? Another very interesting part of the Pilgrim story. There you are. Okay, let's go this way.
Okay.
We're leaving Lakenhal, this wonderful canal. We have the oldest theater of Western Europe, I think.
Mm-hmm. It
The
dates
Leidse
from...
Schouwburg. Try and say that in English.
Well, I wouldn't translate that. It's such a beautiful name. But
Leidse
it
Schouwburg.
dates from 1705, so the oldest still in use theater in the Netherlands, yeah.
And is it true that this was kind of beer central in the 17th century?
Yes, we had a lot of breweries in town. Beer was the only thing you could, well, safely drink. Something else than the water you're taking now. The water was not safe to drink because of, well, it was not clear, you could get cholera out of
so the water was contaminated. It was just unsafe to drink.
Right. So everybody drank beer. Also, children drank beer.
Kids drank beer.
Yeah, but they say that the percentage of alcohol was a little bit lower than today.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't know if that's true. And as we are walking on the bridge, we also have a very nice view at the facade of the Lakenhal. But I think you already saw it with Jory.
Yeah, we went and saw the Courtyard.
Yeah.
So the theater there, that was also a brewery, I think?
Yes,
right?
it was also is placed on a built on the place where a brewery was, and alongside the canals there were a lot of these breweries.
Okay.
I mean, everybody had to drink beer, so
So there were a lot of
then you
breweries.
need a lot of beer. And this, yeah.
Do we have... I mean, where are we going now? We're going to the old guest house, right?
Yes,
St.
we are going
Elizabeth
to the
guest house.
Boerhaven Museum, which
Yeah.
was a former guest house. And this is the St. Elizabeth guest house. Now, guest house is a little bit strange, sounds a little bit strange, but we had guest houses already in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
And this one dates from the 15th century. The houses you see over here, they are from the 17th century.
Okay.
And we call them proveniershuisjes.
Okay.
Elderly people, citizens of Leiden, could buy themselves in for such a house, so that they would be sure that they would have a good old day.
Okay.
And that's why it also has a chapel. I'm now losing my microphone. And the chapel was also in use by the people of the guest house. And Leiden had a lot of guest houses, and the Boerhaven Museum, where we are going to now, has also been a guest house. And it was in use during the plague epidemics as a plague hospital.
Talk about some relevant themes.
Yes, right.
The plague, was it during the time that the Pilgrims were here, or around that time? When
Yes, well, the one during the Pilgrim time was in 1625, so the Pilgrims
some
stayed
of them
here.
just left, yeah.
Yeah, and then another one in 1635, another one 1655.
Yeah, a lot. How
of
did
people
people deal
died.
with it then? So these
Yeah.
places played a major role, right? So people who were contaminated were kind of isolated in
Right,
these guest houses, in plague houses. if
They
you will.
tried to do that, but nothing helped, so people died anyway.
Yeah.
And in Museum de Lakenhal, there's a very nice modern artwork of Erin Olaf
Yeah.
that dates from 2011. But it's a photograph, and it shows how it must have been in the time of the not the time of the Pilgrims, but the time when Leiden was sieged by the Spanish soldiers. There was a plague epidemic then going on. Half of the population of Leiden died.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's an instart that we see
Yeah. Do we have
right
the photo
now.
of Erwin
The
Olaf
photo
that we
of
can show,
Erwin
please?
Olaf. And you see in front of that photograph, people are starving because of the plague epidemic, and it shows you how horrifying that must have been.
Yes.
And the museum where we are going now, the Boerhaven Museum,
That's a national science museum.
It's a national science
Another
museum.
national museum
Yeah.
in our city.
We have a lot of them.
Yes.
And they prepared an exposition about pandemics.
Yeah.
And it can't go on now because of the pandemic.
It
which
is so bizarre. I heard
Yeah.
that they were planning this exhibit
Yeah.
for a long time, and they
Yeah.
were about to open, and then pandemic actually
and
happened.
pandemic
So
was there.
yeah,
Right.
but,
And it's,
we won't go there
No.
today, but we do have a fascinating slide to show the audience of the anatomical theater. Can you tell something
Yes.
about that?
it's a reconstruction of the anatomical theater that used to be in the church of the Faliede Bagijnen. We
Yeah.
will go there later on during the tour. And that church was also in use by the Pilgrims, but it also housed an anatomical theater,
Yeah.
and it housed a fencing school for the students of the university.
Wow.
Very strange, but the
Interesting meeting grounds for
Yes,
all people from
exactly. And the anatomical theater was, of course, something very special. It was the first time that they did things like that. So in wintertime, when it was freezing and when they had a corpse,
Yeah.
then they could give an anatomical lesson. If you were rich and you wanted to join such a lesson because it was interesting
Yeah.
to tell your friends, then you
Yeah.
could pay for it and go to an anatomical lesson.
So it was kind of a theater. You
kind
would
of
go
theater.
to
Yeah.
the movies. You would go to see the dissection of a corpse.
Exactly. And on
Wonderful.
the print, you also see people richly dressed, and those were the people who, well, paid to attend such an anatomical lesson.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. We have arrived at the Onze Lieve Vrouwekerk. I think, Marlijn? Ariela? Ariela, so wonderful to see you. This is great, by the way. This I haven't seen everybody for 2 months, and now everybody just walks into the screen. You're the director of Leiden Heritage. Where are we, and why is this such an important part of the Pilgrim story?
We're at the back of what used to be the Vrouwekerk. I say used to be. There used to be an enormous church here, but as you can see, only a bit of the choir is left. And it was one of the 3 parish churches in Leiden. It was used by the balloon community. Except for the Pilgrims, Leiden also had an enormous refugee community who were French or Northern Belgium, Walloons. And they had that church here. And some of them even went with the Pilgrims to America. So it was the poorest church. And that's why they gave it to the immigrants. It was a fairly poor neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And the balloons mostly stayed here. Some of them also went to America later to found New Amsterdam. But because it's such an important pilgrim place, we have commissioned a few reconstructions of pilgrim places as they would have looked at the time of the Pilgrims.
Because this is one of the main projects of Heritage Leiden this year.
This is one of our main projects.
Digitally reconstruct some of the places that are no longer with us in full glory.
Yes.
And this is basically, we're going to see 3 of those places today, and this is going to be the first one.
Yes.
Why is it important to reconstruct these places?
Because we have a lot of documents. They are all written in 17th century script. They're difficult to read. We have transcribed them. You can read them on the database. But if you want to have a real feel of what the city the Pilgrims lived in looked like, you really want to see the buildings as they were. There are a lot of buildings which are still the same, like City Hall, but there are an awful lot of places which have changed. And we wanted to give people the feeling, this is the city of the Pilgrims.
Yeah. And this is still going on, the reconstructions as we speak?
As
I mean,
we
there's
speak.
still scholars and technicians working on it?
Yeah. It's a combination between historians, building historians and 3D experts. And they find all the information they can about the building. We have some pictures, but also some charts where you can see the actual sizes, the footprint.
Yeah.
And from all that information, they built the building.
They kind of rebuild.
Yeah, they can rebuild the building. I think Theo will tell you a bit more about it
we'll
later.
Meet Theo, your colleague in this project later on. So when will people be able to see this online? And
the first reconstruction is online now. That's Breestraat. That will Theo explain to you later. I think today you'll get a sneak preview of this one. The Bagijnenkerk is also nearly finished. So I think over the next few months, watch this space.
Wonderful, wonderful. And a bit more about, is there anything more you can tell us about this place?
Yes, I said some of the pilgrims went with, some of the balloons went with the Pilgrims. There is one marriage in our records between Hester Mailleu and Thomas Cook. They went on the Mayflower. And Hester Mailleu's nephew, Philippe de Lanois, he was baptized here and he went on the Fortune, followed his aunt basically. And he is an ancestor of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That's where the Delano comes from. Delanois, Delano.
Delanois.
Yeah.
She has Wallonian roots.
Yeah.
Marlijn, can we show some... Oh, we already did.
Yes,
the people at home already
excellent.
saw this footage. Ariela, thank you so much for now. I think we will meet each other at Heritage Leiden again.
See you later.
You'll tell us something more about the Pilgrim archives. So see you in a bit.
Okay, see you. Enjoy.
Marike, yes.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting little gem in our city.
Yes, it's a very special special house. Well, we're glad it's still there. It says in Dutch, stadsbrandspuiten. That means that this was in use by the firemen in the 17th century. It was, of course, very dangerous with all those wooden houses in the town. And in 1614, it lasted until 1614, until they invented something like a fire
hose. A fire hose, right?
Yeah, but not as we have it today. They had to, well, put it in a bucket with water and then fill it, and then they had to go to the house and try to extinguish the fire. And that was housed inside here, so they could get in and out with a kind of, well, car, I think, with the thing on it, and then all the buckets. Still special that it's still here. We have several of them in Leiden at different spots.
At different locations.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, how
I think in the meantime we'll be walking to the center, though the place where the old Rhine and the new Rhine confluence, I think it's called. I'm not a native speaker, but come together. While we walk there, I think it'd be nice to hear from one of our international partners again. This time people from the UK. I think we have Adrian Vinken, who is the chairman of Mayflower 400 UK, and my dear colleague Charles Hackett, the executive director. First, I think we're going to listen to Adrian Vinken.
Hello Marlene, Martijn, Michael. On behalf of all your English partners in the Mayflower commemoration and project, we just want to say we're really sorry we can't be with you. I'm speaking to you from an empty Plymouth, to you in an empty Leiden. But we wish you all the best for your launch on Saturday, and look forward to the time when we can come back to Leiden to enjoy the Pieterskerk, to the Lakenhal, and to see your wonderful Intellectual Baggages Museum. It's been a great partnership so far, and we look forward to building on it towards the back end of this year and next year to enjoy the cultural richness we all share together. And look forward to seeing you online and having your virtual tour on Saturday. Tot ziens.
Hello, my name is Charles Hackett. I'm the Chief Executive of Mayflower 400 in the UK. This 400th anniversary commemorative programme is the first time that this anniversary, this heritage, this common culture has really been looked at and commemorated from a Four Nations approach. And with our partners at the Wampanoag Advisory Committee, our partners in Plymouth and the whole of Massachusetts, and of course in Leiden, have really come together to create something and prepare something that was really special. As we look to put on this programme across our nations through different means and in very challenging times, I think the connection between our countries, our places, our communities, and the historical legacies that of the past, but also the partnerships into the future, will be so important. I'm sorry not to be there with you in Leiden today. I'm looking forward to taking part remotely and visiting again in the future, and encourage you all also to come and visit the other locations and explore this history that binds us together over the coming years.
So finally we are arriving in what a lot of experts have said, the real city center, right? Where the old and the new Rhine come together. Mm-hmm. And we will see, or our guests will see, the weighing house, the Waag, as we say it. Can you tell us a bit about that? What kind of building is that?
Well, the weigh house itself, as we see it now, dates from 1658, so a little bit later than the time of the Pilgrims. But before this weigh house, there was another one. Not so beautiful as this one, perhaps, but it was in function. And it is the center where the market took place. So now we saw at the beginning of the tour that the market has been replaced because of the coronavirus.
Yes.
Towards the winter.
For the first time in hundreds of years. Right?
Ever since, since Leiden exists, the market takes place here, alongside the water of the Rhine, every Wednesday and Saturday. Saturday is the big market. Very nice if people come to visit Leiden, that they can see the market. And when the Pilgrims arrived in Leiden, they arrived here. So this is what they saw. So they embarked right here. And in the time of the pilgrims, there must have been a crane, because the crane hoisted all the merchandise.
All the goods from the boats onto there, and the weighhouse was where they would weigh the goods. Yeah, I presume.
Before it could be sold, yes.
Before it could be sold.
Yes, exactly. So it's more or less what the pilgrims saw, and what you said is correct, that both arms, the old and the new Rhine, come together here. So this is exactly where we see where Leiden started. It's an island in the middle of both arms of the Rhine, with a very nice fortress on it, Burgt, which we can't see from here.
But we see the top of the trees, right? So if the camera can just zoom there, there's the trees you see above the houses. That is the that one, those over there. That is where the Burgt is, the Leiden Castle. So we're really now in the throbbing heart of the old medieval city center.
Oldest part.
Oldest part of the city.
And we are walking towards the brug, the fish bridge.
Okay, this is the fish bridge, right?
Yes, this one, with the coat of arms of Leiden on it. You see in front of it the coat of arms of Leiden. And the bridge was already there. There must have been some kind of bridge, not exactly this one, but in the 12th century already. And the cellars we see to the left, I mean, it's some kind of place where they could stock all the things that they couldn't sell on the market. Yeah. Nowadays it's a restaurant, but of course it's closed now. And the fish bridge, well, really the oldest bridge, the connection between the oldest part of town and this part, which is also medieval, of course. And if we get on this bridge and we turn ourselves again towards the Waag.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there is a very nice instart of a painting of Van der Burg, which shows exact this location with the weighhouse over there. And then we can see, or the viewers can see, that it didn't change at all. So it still looks the same, as many, parts of Leiden do, of course.
While we are showing the viewers some footage, I think it'll be also nice to, you mentioned briefly the coat of arms of Leiden. Yeah. We came across it a couple of times, the two keys.
Cross keys.
Marlijn, maybe you can show the coat of arms of Leiden, first page.
We have the coat of arms with Hic Libertatis.
The Hic Libertatis Ergo.
Right.
There's a Latin words on it. Hic Libertatis Ergo. What does it mean?
In Dutch it means dit omwille van de vrijheid. So this for the sake of freedom.
For the sake of liberty, for the sake of freedom.
Yes.
So this is kind of a theme that runs throughout the city, right?
It's the motto, you could say.
It's the motto of the city.
Of the city, yeah.
Then we have the motto of the university.
Yes.
Praesidium Libertatis, university that was given to the people of Leiden after the siege ended.
Yeah.
Which means what exactly?
Bulwark of freedom.
The seat of liberty.
Seat of liberty, yeah.
And the two red keys that you see everywhere in the city, even here, like the lantern posts, everywhere there's
really
keys. In Dutch we call it Sleutelstad, right?
Sleutelstad.
The city of keys.
Yeah.
Why these keys? What's with these keys?
Well, these keys refer to Saint Peter. And Saint Peter was the patron saint of Leiden. That's why our oldest church, where we will go on later, is called the Pieterskerk,
Saint Peter's Church.
So we
because
have
the keys are the keys to heaven.
The keys of heaven, of the gate of heaven.
The gate of heaven.
I always joke that there's a spare key for the citizens of Leiden, but it's well.
Yeah. This when I first came to Leiden, when I was 18, I started studying here. This was one of the most bizarre things. I've never seen such a.
Really?
To me it was a very bizarre. What kind of bridge is it? What is it?
Well, it's not the Ponte Vecchio in Firenze, but well, you know, it's a covered bridge, but the bridge itself is much older. I don't know if we will show it now, Marlijn, but there is an instart with a drawing from the bridge. But we can better do that later on.
We'll get there. We're jumping way ahead.
Yeah, well, no, okay. So we will talk about this later, about the special bridge.
While everybody tries to practice social distancing.
Yeah.
As you can see, our viewers in the US and the UK can see, Netherlands is slowly opening up again.
Yeah.
So people are allowed out for necessary things, but also for a little stroll. So life is slowly coming back to normal. But
and normally it's crowded here.
Normally
always,
you could walk on the heads here.
On the heads, yes.
I mean, it's not like it's busy. It might seem that way.
Yeah. So it's one of the coziest parts of Leiden with all these old streets.
Yes. And we are walking now towards the Leiden American Pilgrim Museum.
Right.
And there's somebody that I want to introduce to people watching now. His name is Jeremy Banks. And a lot of people might know him. He's considered the specialist when it comes to the pilgrims and their time in Leiden. He has written tons of books about it, and just recently he wrote a new book. I think he will tell something about this himself in a video we have for you shortly. But he's also the director of the Leiden American Pilgrim Museum. Now, Jeremy couldn't be with us today, unfortunately, but we have Sarah Moyne, his assistant and somebody that has been working for the Leiden American Pilgrim Museum for a long time, and she's waiting for us at the museum to give us a tour. Now, it is very small inside, so I think I'll try to go in with one cameraman. Maybe you can stay out. I don't know if there's even place for us. But before we arrive there, we'll sort out the logistics. Maybe it's good to watch the film where Jeremy talks a bit about himself and his work.
Books were very important to the pilgrims, not only the books they read, but also the books they themselves published. And later you see the place where William Brewster organized the publication of several books. There have been hundreds of books about them since then, and for this year we have two ourselves. One is a book about Plymouth Colony, which also has a chapter on the sources that William Brewster used for knowing about Dutch law and how it was important. The other one is a catalogue for an exhibit that is now just imaginary. This is the exhibit we would like to have done. Circumstances have changed that. It's about books that the pilgrims owned, and it gives catalogue entries and essays about the books that they read, how they were important to them, and some particular topical essays about, for example, paintings of books in Leiden in the 17th century, and biographical notes about two of the pilgrims who are often overlooked, Isaac Hamilton and Thomas Willett, with a nice introduction by the great expert on Puritan religion in New England. But I wrote most of the catalogue entries and a small essay about the pilgrims as publishers in Leiden. So we're happy to bring this out, even though the exhibit has been cancelled for various reasons. The catalogue exists even after an exhibit is or is not taking place. So this is our major contribution as a museum this year.
Leiden American Pilgrim Museum. Hope Sarah is here.
Hello.
Sarah, hi, good to see you.
Welcome.
All right, I'll just scoot in here. I know how small it is. It's good to be back. I hope you're fine. I think the camera is going that way. Everybody takes his spot. Yes. Wonderful that you could make time and to have us here and with us, all those thousands of people watching from all over the world.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about the museum. I mean, was this really a place where pilgrims lived, or?
No, so this isn't a house where any of the pilgrims ever lived. This just so happens to be the only 17th century interior of the house to be intact. The museum is actually set in the oldest datable house of Leiden. The original construction is from 1365. the museum has two rooms. Next door, we have a medieval room, and the room we're in right now is in its 17th century state. And it's actually furnished only with items that are also from the 1600s. So this is the best place in Leiden to see how people lived, and specifically how pilgrims lived. Most people lived in one-room homes, so this is the case here. Everything is contained in just one space for your daily life activities. This room is actually the same size as William Brewster's house, and you actually have been talking about William Brewster on the way, and I know that later you'll see the location of his old house. The house itself is gone, but looking at this room you can get a feel of the amount of space that he had. Not everyone was actually that lucky. This room is twice the size of a poor family's house, so if you were to build a wall in the half of it, this is the space that an ordinary poor family would have. So the way a house is normally organized is quite minimal. The fireplace is the kitchen. We still have the cupboard bed or bedstay, which would have been the bedroom at the time. And in the corner, we have a little door, which is where the toilets would have been. Most of the time, toilets were in the garden, but this house doesn't have a garden, so that's where they put the facilities. The room itself is furnished with items, as I said, that are all period. Most of them are Dutch or English, but we do have a couple of American elements. This chair is actually the only piece of furniture that is from America. It was made in Plymouth Colony. So we have some objects in the room that are just illustrating daily life, and some of them that are more specifically closely linked to the pilgrims. This is one of them. Other items that we have that are more closely related to the pilgrims are the books that we collect. We, for a little while now, have been collecting books that appear in pilgrim libraries, so books that pilgrims actually read. And the latest addition to this is a Bible. I'm going to try to show this to you with a mic in the other hand. This is a Geneva Bible, which is the Bible that the pilgrims favored. This one is from 1602, and the main characteristics is that it's a Calvinist translation in English, and it has little comments in the margins. I guess you can see them from that far away, which indicates that there is an interpretation already that goes with the text. So we were quite happy to have this particular book. But not all the books that the pilgrims read were religious books. So we also have this book, which is about military strategies. It appears in the library of Miles Standish, and it shows how soldiers are supposed to behave on battlefields. It's also in English, and you have little diagrams showing how soldiers should have been behaving on the fields. So all of these books constitute a sort of a literal intellectual baggage that the pilgrims traveled with, and this is actually the title of the latest book that the museum published. It is a catalogue of the different books that we collected, and it also includes essays from different specialists, among which of course, Jeremy Banks, the director of the museum, but also other people participated, and Donna Curtin is another example of them. Yeah, so this is pretty much what the museum is about. I thought also that I will show you our money box, because you actually passed by the place where it's actually from. Yeah. I'll move this. Our money box is actually from Onze Lieve Vrouwekerk. And as you heard before, this is where the Walloons used to have their services. So it says in French, pour les pauvres, for the poor. And you would put a coin there before or after the service for charity. And so now we actually still use it for the museum. So it's a nice touch to have, knowing that some people actually went to that church and then traveled with the pilgrims to America.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
You're welcome.
It's wonderful. The intellectual baggage book and everything else that Jeremy has written, is there a place that people can go for more information if they want to maybe order the book or read more about it?
So for this book, you can actually order it on Lulu, which is the publisher of the book. And this is the case for most of Jeremy's books. So they're not all from the same publisher, but you can always look for them this way. So this one is from Brill, and the latest one I showed you is from Lulu. So that's the best place to look for them.
Thank you so much. If people want to read more, and of course visit the website of the Latin American Pilgrim Museum.
Yes, there's a lot of information on there as well.
All right. Thank you so much for hosting us. And well, it's weird, but I of course hope that soon you can have people from the US coming here again, because every time I was here for the past 3 years, there would also be, I would have a meeting with you or Jeremy, and there was a knock on the door, and somebody from the US came, in search for their ancestors, and it was, I mean, it's a wonderful place to be. So I hope that people can come here soon again.
Yes, we're going to open again at the beginning of June. Trying to work with some of the restrictions we have to be careful for.
You're not a very large museum. So
exactly. But yeah, before we have tourists that come from further away, it's going to be a little while as well. But I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, this way, thousands of people have been able to visit the museum at least today. So thank you so much, Sarah.
You're welcome.
All right. All right. So...
There you are again.
One of the smallest museums that we have. Absolutely wonderful. I'm absolutely sure that they never had thousands of people at the same time in the museum this way.
No.
So that was great. As we walk this way, we have this wonderful view of the church, the Hooglandse Kerk.
Hooglandse Kerk.
Highland Church.
Yeah, Highland Church.
Highlandish Church.
Pancratius Church.
And this is called the Beschuitsteeg, the Biscuit Alley. When I was studying here, I knew some guys who lived here. It was called the Biscuit Alley. That's how everybody called it. Maybe we can... There's an old drawing that we can maybe show by Kickert. Yeah.
It didn't change that much.
See how it looked. Okay, so now we go to this... what I always thought was a bizarre bridge, but maybe you can tell us more about it. The Kornbeursbrug.
Kornbeursbrug. It's also a very old bridge. Not as old as the fish bridge, but then nowadays it is covered. And the coverage of the bridge dates from 1825. But the bridge is much older. And there is an older drawing, which also is an instart. And I think the viewers can see that now, which shows that the bridge looked a little bit different. And it was in use during the market days by corn traders. And they could hide their barges underneath the bridge. But it was much more, easy to have these coverage on the bridge. So that's what they did in 1825. And it still is the city center, of course, during the center of the market, when the market is going on.
Yes.
And it's also the rear side, the back side of the City Hall, which we are going to see.
Yes, because this brings us to City Hall, which is a fascinating and beautiful building.
Beautiful building.
On two sides. We'll later walk through the Breestraat, the Broadway of Leiden, to see the other side. But, I mean, we have the sun in our eyes, but can you tell us a bit about Leiden City Hall? I think there's some constructions going on at the moment, but...
Yeah, the City Hall itself dates from the end of the 1595. So it's a rather old town hall. And it was already there when the Pilgrims came to Leiden. There has been a big fire in 1929.
Yeah.
And that is why the other side, or this side of the town hall, looks a little bit similar.
Yeah.
But the nicest part is the front part of the town hall. Now, during the time that the Pilgrims were in Leiden, there was a big religious dispute going on.
Yes.
And there is an instart which shows us a barricade, which was called the Arminiaanse Schans.
Yeah.
The Armenian barricade.
Yes.
The dispute that was going on was a dispute between two professors in theology, Gomarus and Arminius. A strict Protestant professor and a more moderate Protestant professor. They quarreled with each other.
Yeah.
some of the pilgrims, I think it was William Brewster, who also got involved.
John
or
Robertson
followed.
partook in the debates.
It was
I
John
know.
Robinson,
John Robinson,
right.
yes. Because the debate was about predestination, I
right,
think.
it was, yeah. And, well, it was actually a national thing going on, but the center of it was here in Leiden. So they had to barricade the town hall.
A bit like they're doing now.
Right.
I didn't know this, but apparently it's under construction. But this is how they barricaded it. They did this especially for us to make our point.
Especially today.
But it began as a religious debate, but it really, it really went into this almost like a little civil war, right?
Yeah, it was, well, it went on national niveau between Prince Maurice and Oldenbarneveld, but that was in The Hague. And in Leiden it was because of these professors that you could say that, well, it really was the center where it took place.
Yeah.
The town hall still looks the same, the front of the town hall. The street has changed a little bit.
It looks quite different now.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting spot, is it not?
It is. It's called the Blauwe Steen, the Blue Stone.
The Blue Stone.
And originally it divided the town in 4 quarters.
Yeah.
And it was also the place where executions took place. And later on it went to the Graafsteen.
Theo is not here and I can't reach him.
Okay. We have a first no-show.
Yeah, yeah. What we can do now is, you've seen the digital reconstruction of the Breestraat, right?
Yes.
And so we can see Theo later on at the Faliede Bagijnenkerk.
Sure, then he can
so we can show,
But
so
it will be nice now to show our guests the reconstruction.
Yeah, we
that's
will.
where you go.
Yeah. So maybe you can tell something about the Breestraat, and I will try to ring Theo again then when we are at the Faliede Bagijnenkerk, so he will be there.
Well, maybe it's good to ask you about...
Give it to you. Almost crushed.
Try to choose between persons under a bus or having a virus. This is what you get with live TV, people.
So I'm going to leave this up to you.
Yeah.
Talk about the Breestraat, I'll do the inserts. And,
yeah, so Breestraat, this is basically the vein, could you say, the main vein of the town?
It's the oldest street of Leiden.
Oldest street, yeah.
And as you can see later on, we will go a little bit down into these alleys.
Yeah.
This is a higher part. It was constructed as a dike to protect people against the water when it rose, the level of the water of the Rhine. Actually, this already was a road when the Romans were here in Leiden. That's a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
But they made this way, they constructed this way to have their soldiers march from Leiden to Volkenkunde.
Lugdunum Batavorum.
Right, those days.
And Marlijn, can we show the reconstruction at the moment? Can we show the reconstruction now? Because I think it's really interesting to see. And another reason why I think is very nice to have the city hall here. Imagine living somewhere for 12 years, right? If I live somewhere for 12 years, I'm bound to be influenced by that place. And so I think also the Pilgrims were in some way influenced by what they encountered in Leiden. And one of these things was a legal innovation called civil marriage, right?
Yeah, right.
So what was the deal with that? You could marry in front of the magistrate. So not
Yes.
only in front of the church, but also for the magistrate. You get married.
Right. In the 17th century, not everybody belonged to the Reformed Church, to the Protestant Church. So more than half of the population in our country had the Catholic religion or another religion. They also had to be married. So that's why we invented the civil marriage. And that is what the Pilgrims also experienced during their stay here in Leiden. So when they married at the town hall. And we have an example of a brother and a sister called Isaac Ellerton
and Sarah Ellerton.
Brother and sister, both marrying on the same day.
Yeah, with somebody else. That's just to get it clear. Yeah, okay.
And well, so they were influenced by it, as you say, and they brought it with them, of course, to Plymouth.
Yeah.
Because in the first year that they lived in Plymouth, they didn't have a
Well, of course. I mean, I can imagine for people who get persecuted by church and state, it was a new... This civil right was incredibly handy because it kind of protected you, of course.
Yeah.
And so it is my understanding, Jeremy once told me this, Jeremy Banks, that they took it, wrote it into the Mayflower Compact, in the Boston Constitution, and ultimately it's one of the cornerstones of American democracy, the separation of church and state, which all began here at City
Leiden,
Hall.
right where we're standing now. And of course, it's the City Hall as well, the town hall, that gave them permission to stay. But that's
Also
the document, perhaps it's shown later at the
when we go to
archive.
Heritage Leiden, I'm sure we'll visit the document. Now we'll go down into the alleyways, hopefully more quiet, with all the buses trying to murder us. This is the Pieterskerk Wijk, or the...
It's the Pieterskerk
area, yes, the Goorsteeg.
The alley of the choir of the Peters Church, because we're walking towards the Peters Church, where we have the choir.
Yeah.
One of the oldest streets of Leiden. Very nice streets to walk through. And as we arrive at this cross point, this small street is called the Lange Brug. You write it like that in Dutch. And in English you would say Long Bridge.
Yeah.
Nowadays we just see a street, but in the days of the Pilgrims this was a canal.
Okay.
With all kind of little bridges crossing the canal. And by looking at that canal with all those bridges, it looked like one long bridge. And this was also the place where the falling took place. The falling, I don't know if Jori has shown you the series with the 4 paintings of Van Zwanenburg. Well, the falling of the cloth was that the men had to thread with their bare legs the cloth through, well, you know, a messy kind of thing. That took place here. So this was really a kind of, well, a little bit stinking canal. And I think that must have been one of the reasons that they muted the canal later
exactly.
on. Over there, the orange house, I don't know if you can see it or the camera, small orange house to the left, number 45. That's the house where John Adams and his son later, John Quincy Adams.
Ah, yeah, they lived there.
They lived there, yeah. So they have been in Leiden for some time.
As well. And both became president of the United States, as we now know.
Yeah.
And there's also a very special house on that side, right?
Right. We didn't talk about Rembrandt yet, but I shouldn't start talking about Rembrandt because I won't finish them. But he's... what the camera now is filming is the entrance gate of the Pens Hall, the tribe hall. Tribe was, of course, a very cheap kind of meat, which could be, well, bought by the poor. And that was already there in the time of the Pilgrims. And it shows us the sheep. It's a very nice statue. I love it a lot. With the coat of arms of Leiden. And a little bit further down this road, there is the Rembrandt studio, young Rembrandt studio. And that is the place where Rembrandt followed lessons at Van Zwanenburg, Jacob van Zwanenburg.
This is where he learned to paint.
Right, where he learned everything, you could say. So it's a very important street.
We haven't talked so much about Rembrandt
so
far. Maybe we should, while walking to the Pieterskerk.
Yes, and at the university perhaps, or now,
exactly.
yes.
Well, no, just talk a bit about it, because it's interesting. I remember being the first time I was in the US, I was asked to do a presentation on the Leiden story about the Pilgrims.
Yeah.
And I was in a room in Massachusetts of, I think, 300-400 people. And I said, does anybody know, while the Pilgrims were staying in Leiden, there was this going on, the university was just founded, etc. And there was a 14-year-old boy running around at that time, learning how to paint. He became quite famous. Anybody know who it was, who it might have been?
Yeah.
And nobody knew.
They didn't.
And there was one person. Well, there were people just from tourism industry, etc. I said, well, that was Rembrandt.
Yes.
And somebody said, the Rembrandt?
Yes,
the Rembrandt. They kind of fell from their chairs.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he was walking these cobbled streets
Yeah, he was
as
born
the Pilgrims
in Leiden,
were as well.
of course. Yeah, he was there right in the time of the Pilgrims. And everybody thinks that Rembrandt comes from Amsterdam, but he really comes from Leiden. It's here where he spent the first 24 years of his life.
Yeah.
And really, as a boy, as you say, he frequented this district a lot because the Latin school was here. And he was at the Latin school, and when he was 14 years old, he went to Jacob van Zwanenburg. So he perhaps might have
They
met...
may perhaps bumped into each other at the market or whatnot.
Yeah.
Okay, we are now, this is really one of the pilgrim highlights of Leiden, right? The William Brewster Alley, or as we call it, Smelly Alley.
Smelly alley, yeah. Well, we still have some garbage cans in the alley, but in those days, these were really alleys where, well, many people lived together and, you know, everything was thrown out of the houses. So it was a really smelly place. But it is the place where William Brewster had the printing shop together with with Thomas Brewer. And together they had the printing shop over here. They printed, of course, the books that were forbidden in England. So it was a very important place for them.
Jori told us just now that because it was such a small building, and actually I saw this was in the press, in the national Dutch press yesterday, that they found the remnants of the original house of Brewster. It was such a place. He probably didn't have the printing press here, but he prepared everything for press, and then would go to one of the many presses or printers in the city to partner up and to get help to get it actually printed, right?
Yeah.
But this was dangerous business.
It was dangerous.
I mean, not in Leiden because we had freedom of press, but it was dangerous business for them because obviously this is not what the English crown wanted.
No, and that's why I think it was Thomas Brewer who once was, well, he couldn't, it was the English crown, I think, or he was arrested, and then he had to flee. And, well, that was, of course, a problem, but I think it was his right. He was protected by the university because he was inscribed at university and university students.
This gave a lot of legal rights, I think, being inscribed in the university. Yeah. I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit later. What I found really nice the first time I was in Plymouth, US, is that, of course, I went to Leiden when I was 18. I studied here, so I know Thomas Brewster Alley. But I think we have a photo of that also. There is, when you go to Plymouth, US for the first time, thank you.
Yeah.
I was amazed that I came into the center of the town and there was this sign saying Leiden Street. Then I looked into it and it's the oldest still inhabited street of the United States. Called Leiden Street. So we have Thomas Brewster Alley, they have Leiden Street.
They have the Leiden Street.
And it's so wonderful to come across these really tangible links.
Yeah.
And places so far away where we share this common history. So
it's marvelous, yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely... for the first time then I realized, hey, wait a minute, we're all part of the same story.
Well, it's what Americans also say when I guide them through town and they see the Brewster Alley. They are really amazed that it is here. And
we are walking in what has to be one of the most beautiful streets of Leiden, if you ask me. And we have arrived at the St. Peter's Church, the Pieterskerk. I think,
where you will go in?
Yes, I think I will go in. Hey,
again.
how are you doing? We'll meet Frieke Hurkmans here. She's the director of the Pieterskerk. and I leave all of you in her capable hands to give us a tour.
Michael!
Frieke, it's so wonderful to see you.
What?
This is, if nothing else, this was a great excuse to see each other again after all these weeks of isolation.
Welcome.
Yes, always in awe walking in here. I just told the viewers I leave them in your capable hands for the next 15, 20 minutes.
Oh no, stick with me.
Yeah, I would like
stick with me.
I'll stick with you. But please, just go. Just tell us.
Well, all the viewers, you've just entered the Pieterskerk Leiden. Next year we'll have our 900 years celebration. And in 1121, this started off as a chapel, and it's now like cathedral size, as we can all see. And ever since the 70s of the last century, it's not a church anymore. So it's now a national monument.
As you sometimes joke, God has left the building.
Yes, more or less,
yes.
more or less. But what we do preserve, we preserve 900 years of stories.
Yes.
And by doing that, we preserve, of course, the stones and the monuments and everything that comes with it. What I'd like to do is, because of course we have a huge pilgrim history, but I'd like to skip a century or so and start off in the 18th century, and I'd like to take you to Jean Lussac, the monument of Jean Lussac.
Okay.
And Jean Lussac was a Greek professor at the University of Leiden. He was also a lawyer and a political activist, and but he is mostly remembered, and his connection to the American history is connected with that he was the owner and editor of the Gazette of Leiden. Oh, yeah. And the Gazette of Leiden was, as some would say, the most important Western world newspaper of that time. As Thomas Jefferson said about the Gazette of Leiden, he said, it's the only newspaper worth reading. And so that was
some recommendation.
Yes, and actually the French king Louis XVI, he only read the Gazette of Leiden, so he didn't read any other newspaper. Now Lussac, being a political activist, really joined with the American revolutionaries, and came in contact with John Adams, and as well, you know, but some of our viewers may not know, John Adams was the first ambassador ever of the United States, and came to the Netherlands, and together with his wife Abigail and his son John Quincy, who later, as John Adams, became the second president of the United States, and John Quincy Adams was, I think, the fifth or sixth president. And Jean Lussac, they arrived in the Netherlands and immediately went to Jean Lussac. And what Jean did was make the connection between history from the Netherlands from a few centuries before, and as we call it in Dutch, the Akte of Verlatingen, where we left the Spanish kingdom. And he made that connection with the Declaration of Independence. And what he also wrote to George Washington and Thomas Jefferson is he told them to realize that they were really marking history, and would they please put their notes on good parchment. And the best parchment at that time was Dutch parchments from the paper mills not far from Leiden. So he made sure that that the Declaration of Independence and the first notes were written on Dutch paper. And actually the first, I think 100 or 200, Ariela from would know that exactly, but at least 100 of the first copies of the Declaration of Independence were printed on Dutch paper. And I think my colleague Boy Heinekamp has got, because that parchment, that one of the paper mills, there's only one paper mill that still exists.
It's still left, right? Yeah.
And actually it is exactly the paper from that time. It's made exactly on the time and printed the declaration on it. So we have a few limited, but we have a few copies. So that's, you know, unusual that there is this enormous connection even on the paper.
I always jokingly say that the Pieterskerk is kind of American heritage.
Yes.
I mean, it's
well,
Leiden American
yes,
heritage. It's not just the Pilgrims. There's
no,
so
it's
much
Dutch heritage, but it's also American heritage abroad. And there's all these different stories connecting through the centuries, connecting the Pieterskerk, and of course you've told the people about the keys, the symbol.
We just were discussing it because it's everywhere.
And
you walk.
Those keys are obviously the keys of St. Peter, which is the Pieterskerk. So you know, it derives from the spot we're on now.
Yeah.
Now, I'll take you before we walking to the corner where we commemorate the Pilgrims. We now walk to the nave of the Pieterskerk with an enormously big and impressive organ, but also near the pulpit we have the place where Leiden's most famous son, Rembrandt, spent quite a bit of his time, because on that spot his parents and his brother were buried next to the pulpit. But more importantly, Rembrandt used to go. Did you go to the Latin school? Have you? Did you take?
We didn't pass.
Okay. Well, the Latin school is just around the corner.
Yes, a stone throw away.
Yes, and just imagine. Let me take you like it's 1619, and Pilgrims are still living here, just across the Pieterskerk. And let's say Rembrandt, at that time, 13 years old, just met up again with his friend Jan Lievens, and Jan Lievens. Hugely famous painter.
Yeah, great
His
painter.
paintings are from, you know, from the Getty Museum to the National Museum in London, Rijksmuseum, and of course the Lakenhal also has paintings of him. Jan Lievens, a beautiful painter, just a year older than Rembrandt. You know, and those boys played and fooled around and studied and painted. But they would come, you know, they would run around on the square, run into the Pieterskerk, because it would be a throughway to one side of the city to the next. So you
exactly.
It was
a shortcut to go through the church.
It's a shortcut. Now I always imagine those two boys running, playing, drawing. And then there would be, let's say, John Robinson contemplating in the Pieterskerk, just walking in and just reminding those boys,
I need to practice what I'm going to say during the Arminian debates.
Exactly.
He's prepping
boys.
for the debate.
We do not know if they met, we do not know, but it's more than likely.
Well, Fika, I studied here and I lived in this part of Leiden, and you run into each other all the time. You also run into the people you don't want to run into. It's inevitable. It's such a small... And all of these people were walking these cobbled streets.
That's what I would think.
Yeah.
So Rembrandt walking here as a boy, later on, because his father and mother had married in the Pieterskerk, and it being the center, the major church of Leiden, and at that time, if you could afford it, you could be buried in a church. Later on, after Napoleon, all that ritual stopped, but Rembrandt did bury, and of course his siblings buried the father and mother and the brother Adriaan. Here, next to the pulpit, on the center core of the Pieterskerk. We also know that Rembrandt, most probably, with other boys from the Latin Church, was a choir boy in the Pieterskerk. So, no idea what his voice was like.
But they heard him sing.
But they heard him sing. So for sure, you know, we've got. And then we of course have the organ, which is now huge, and it started off as a small organ. It's actually we know about organ even in the 14th century. And there are still now about 100 organ pipes that exist from the times on from 14. The oldest organ pipes are from 1446. So, and those are really the oldest organ pipes in the world still being played. So for sure, the Pilgrims and later on John Adams and even more later on
also
George
lived
Bush.
Around the corner. We just passed our house.
Yes, you
number
passed
45
his house.
at the Long Bridge.
Yeah. And you probably also said, because John Quincy Adams studied at the university, was one of the few presidents that actually spoke Dutch.
Yeah, he spoke Dutch.
He spoke Dutch, yeah. So, and it still sounds, it's a beautiful organ. And then we walk to the corner.
Yes.
Where we have a small but permanent exhibition on the history of the Pilgrims. And it's also the place where John Robinson was buried, or it was the baptistery was the place where, very near to the baptistery, John Robinson in 1625 was buried, because, as we all know, he did not part. And what some of our American and English friends will recognize is that in 2014, I went over to England, and that's where all this project started.
Yes.
And from that came the Mayflower Compact, the modern Mayflower Compact. And our friends might be very pleased that we actually gave it a very prominent place.
Yes.
And so these are all the people, all the cities that from start engaged to commemorate and to make sure that we would not forget about what happened and the modern consequences.
Of course,
because that's so. In this baptistery, we have a few panels that explain. I heard you talk about civil marriage, so it explains about the context.
You were watching.
It explains about the context of the Pilgrims arriving in Leiden, and what was Leiden like, and what was important to them, what did they bring, what did they take from us, and take back to America. And also about the consequences, but because I have to be fair that these panels were changed over the last few years.
Yes.
And I think we've learned a lot.
Yeah, I've addressed that in the beginning of our tour, where I say one of the reasons why we wanted to be in this international commemoration is the urgency that we show these new perspectives, which for a lot of people is Leiden, but for us was totally the native side of the story.
Exactly.
So this is also why you
we've changed textures, and we've exactly, because for us it was a journey too, and it made sure, because from the start it was evident that we put the native nations as a partner, and also give them the recognition, because it's not a romantic story. It's quite a dramatic story.
History is complicated, but if you want to be precise, you have to see all the perspectives.
So that's why. So we also changed during the years. For us, it was a travel, and we changed. So we have a panel on Thanksgiving, and every year on Thanksgiving, American. Mainly expats.
Our good friend Roberta Enschede.
Yes,
I'm
our
sure
good
she's
friend.
Watching.
Yes. Every year she organizes, and a lot of Americans with their families come here to commemorate Thanksgiving. This is the place where, as an American, it's a bit like Abigail Adams. That's what Roberta always opens the Thanksgiving with the words of Abigail Adams, who says that in awe she entered the Pieterskerk. But Thanksgiving also has a different side, and it's a day of mourning for the native nations. So
we were just in the Lakenhal, where they also had a piece about that.
We added that, and one of these panels were, of course, and of course it has been mentioned already, but there's an impressive amount of American presidents that descend from the Leiden Pilgrims.
9, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. Barack Obama.
Yeah, including Barack Obama. For a lot of people, that is a surprise. Everybody knows about Bush, Junior and Senior, but Barack Obama, I think his 13th ancestor was Thomas Blossom, correct?
Yes. And there is a connection with the Bush family, because they're actually far nephews.
Nephews,
yeah. Because Thomas Blossom had, I think, about 7 children. One of them was Peter, the other one was Elizabeth. And Elizabeth, if you go descend, then you end up with Barack Obama and on his mother's side, and Peter, her brother, and then you go down, descend there, and you end up with the family Bush.
With the Bushes.
Yes, so they know they're related.
Yes.
But on all a lot of the maps from that time, it would say Terra Nulla. which means empty land. And by no means was it empty land. That would, that's well, really disrespectful.
It was a myth. Well,
yes.
yeah.
And so we changed all that, and we knew, but the awareness grew.
Yes.
And if only for that reason, it was really, really worthwhile to walk on that journey, which we started in 2014.
With people in the UK and the US.
Yes,
and our friends
absolutely. And going up and forth and talking and discussing and finding common ground.
This is what somebody asked me, a journalist asked me, like now with the epidemic going on, with the pandemic, like, is the entire commemorative year gone? No, because we established long-lasting relationships. We went through all these programs that run well beyond 2020.
Not only that, but I would think that the native nations would say, pandemic, that's what happened to us when you arrived. That's what blew us away in the first place. It decimized the amount of people of the native nations with us coming and bringing disease that they were not resistant to. So, there's all these...
all these themes and threads still running. There's one that I kept for our viewers. You mentioned Thanksgiving. Jeremy Banks, we've just been in Leiden Pilgrim Museum. He claims that Thanksgiving could actually be based on the 3rd of October celebrations.
Well, he's got a point.
What was the 3rd of October for those viewers
who
don't
of course, the 3rd of... You did not tell about Leiden Relief?
Not yet.
Oh, but I did see...
4 hours.
I did see... Well, that's quite... Well, for Leiden, for people in Leiden, not to talk about the Leiden Relief in the first minute is very exceptional. But I did see, because I was following you on Facebook, I did see that you showed the picture of Erwin Olaf.
Yes.
And that was about the Leiden Relief, which was actually the photo. Some people might, if you look back, that photo was made in the Pieterskerk. Leiden Relief was our struggle against the Spanish. And
so there was a siege.
There was a siege
going on for long. People were starving. People were dying.
Yes. And then on the 3rd of October is a very romantic story. Water helped us because,
high tide.
Yes, high tide and floods and flooding, dikes being flooded, made that the Spanish finally fled. And then, so on the 3rd of October...
Deliberately flooded, right?
Deliberately flooded,
yes.
Deliberately flooded. And then on the 3rd of October, 1574, in the morning, people realized that the siege was over.
The Spanish fled.
The Spanish fled.
We are free.
Yes. And then the people of Leiden sort of gathered in the Pieterskerk to say thanks and to thank God. And because the Pieterskerk is the central place.
The living room of the city,
exactly,
if you will.
The living room of the city. So they gathered here to say thanks. And ever since 1574, on the 3rd of October, we commemorate that, so people gather here.
The Relief of Leiden, exactly. The 3rd of October celebration.
Yes, and this year...
But the pilgrims, while living here,
they would have seen it.
They would have seen it. They would have been part of this annual celebration.
And what was special was that they would have seen, of course, the service that was held as a thank you and a reminder. But what they would also have seen was a combination of a religious commemoration and a parade. And those combinations and families gathering together.
Breaking bread, eating
together. So,
herring and white bread.
Exactly. So on the 3rd of October, the city goes wild and everybody, up till now, lives the relief.
I know some of our American guests watching were actually here 1 or 2 years ago. They were here, and
they would know that is very special.
Yes.
And there's another thing why there might be a connection, and Jeremy actually might be right, because the proclamation, there were 2 dates that were important for the Thanksgiving in America. The first was there would be a national Thanksgiving, and I'm not quite sure, forgive me if I think that was done by Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, I think it was Lincoln.
And that was done on the 3rd of October.
Exactly, and that would have been a little...
Again, a few years later, on the 3rd of October, it was proclaimed that Thanksgiving was not only yearly upcoming, it would be yearly celebrated, but also that it was celebrated on the third Thursday of November.
November, yes.
And also,
and we
was
think this 3rd of October, the proclamation on the 3rd of October, we think that's a little wink.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Well, or a major wink, we don't know.
Yeah, well, we know.
Yeah, we know.
We think we know. So I think, do we have some more time, or are we going to go outside?
We have more time. So if you want to tell something.
Well.
Yeah, because later on, that's nice to let the viewers know. Later on, we end this tour and we end this official opening, by showing a very special work by contemporary Leiden artist Caspar Vaassen. I'll tell you a bit more about that, but I don't know. It takes place in this church, and it's absolutely beautiful. So be sure to stick around for the ending.
Yeah. Over the last 2 weeks, Caspar Vaassen made that project. I've seen it yesterday evening, and it's impressive, and you'll recognize the Pieterskerk in its full glory, and 2 beautiful dances. Anyway, but this is also made by Caspar Vaassen. And Caspar made this because this is painting, and of course it's not the real painting, because the real painting, first of all, the real painting is a bit bigger, and the real painting is now in Museum de Lakenhal. Mm-hmm. It moved from the Pieterskerk to the City Hall, and then moved to the Lakenhal, yes. Or maybe even in between the archives, I'm not quite sure. And it's a painting by Lucas van Leiden, and it's called Het Laatste Oordeel.
The Last Judgment. Yeah.
The Last Judgment. And as you can see, we've got on the right, we've got the hell on the left, we've got heaven, and in between there is the Trinity, yes. Who will split humanity in, depending on how you lived your life, Michael. Yes, yes. So, you know, well, it depends.
Let's not go into that.
And then, as in the Lakenhal, and Caspar was invited, or the Lakenhal had invited modern artists to work with the idea of a drieluik,
a triptych.
A triptych, yeah. And this was what Caspar made, because the material is very, at that time especially, is very new. And I just started working here, and we didn't really have a good copy. So Caspar donated this, and we're very, very happy to have that.
To kind of have it back in where it originally was.
Well, we would love to have it back where it originally was, but that will not happen. And next to it is actually the infrared, probably not saying this quite well, a violet red painting, which shows what's under the painting.
Under the paint.
And it shows how immaculate a painter Lucas of Leiden was. And which is nice to see, because that's most of the time is hidden. In the Lakenhal, you can also see it if you go to the backside. There are the 2 saints, yes. This, and then we have Peter on the other side with the keys. So.
And just to give people a sense, I mean, this is 16th century, right? So this is
well, the original, yeah.
Yeah, the original, yeah.
Yes, and at that time, you know, the Pieterskerk was at that time a Catholic church, and had about anywhere between 40 and 50 different altars. And this was made for one of the altars. So all the altars had their own pastors, and had their own choirs, and had their own paintings. And this was one of the very special paintings, and which actually survived. Because afterwards it became a Protestant church.
Yes.
And that ended a lot of paintings and
no
sculptures.
More paintings. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's leave with one last shot of this beautiful, well, as we now deemed it, the the living room of Leiden.
Yes, and what maybe also is important to say is because later on you'll go to the Hortus, or from here you'll probably go to Jean Pesijn and the Hortus, and there's a plaque there on one of the pillars, and you can see that's Carolus Clusius, the founder of the Hortus, and one of the deans and managers of the university. The University of Leiden was founded in the Pieterskerk, a year after the Leiden relief. So in 1575, the University of Leiden started with the signature on a piece of paper in the Pieterskerk, and has ever since been deeply connected. And what we also have, we have an enormous collection of people and great minds that from that time onwards up till Napoleon were buried in the Pieterskerk. So it's also called the Mausoleum Academicum, because it's, you know,
the academic mausoleum of Leiden.
Yes, yes. But Carolus Clusius, you'll see him later on.
We'll go
the
to the
Hortus.
Hortus and we'll talk about him, and of course his cultivating the tulips around the same time that the Pilgrims were there. For now, Friekes, thank you so much for this tour. Great to see you again, and
hope to see our friends in America and England very soon, live. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yes, you
People are watching right now. Unique visitors.
That will be wonderful.
30,000.
That is a lot.
That's quite nice.
I'm all of a sudden nervous again.
No.
So no. But it's wonderful to have you all with us. It's a great day.
I'm going to give this microphone back.
I just want to know, we're now going to the Jan Pesijnhof, but before that, Marika, maybe we can quickly take a look at the plaques.
Yes, you do the plaques and then go to the Jan Pesijnhof.
All right, follow us. I mean, this is such a beautiful spot in Leiden with the trees and everything.
It used to be a cemetery, yeah?
But aren't all cemeteries ultimately beautiful?
Yeah, that's true.
But it's also a very special place. It's not only gorgeous and beautiful, it's also very special, especially when it comes to the link between Leiden and America, right? And it has to do also with these plaques.
Yes. So I think you have been inside, seen the baptism chapel with the plaque of John Robinson. This is another plaque we have on the wall, exactly on the outside of the baptism chapel of the Peters Church. And this plaque refers to the people who lived, the pilgrims who lived here and died here in Leiden. So we have some names of Isaac Ellerton, of whom we talked when we were at the town hall, whose child died here, and other names of women and children, or only children who died and were buried inside the Peters Church. They had the right to do so, so that refers to them. And this is another plaque, and this is in memory of John Robinson. And here we have a nice, picture or sculpture of the Mayflower. And, this has been given in 1891 in remembrance of John Robinson. And this is exactly at the outside of where the other plaque
where we
inside.
just were in the church. And so basically, I always learned that this is also where the pilgrims lived. Is that true?
That's true.
It goes for most pilgrims. I guess not all of them lived at this way, but most pilgrims lived in this space, particularly this courtyard, which was then different, right?
Yeah, this courtyard, as we see it now, dates from, everybody can see that it dates from 1683.
So we would be lying if we would say this is where they lived, but this was the place where their houses were.
Yeah,
or at least the one of, John Robinson, as it says here.
Yeah, so John Robinson lived, of course, until 1625 in Leiden. So he stayed and died in Leiden. And when they came here, he was with 3 other people, of whom I forgot the names, bought this place, which was called the Green Gate. And here were 21 houses, which he bought for his followers. And after they lived here, it was called the Pilgrims Gate, or the English Gate.
William Jepson, Henry Wood, and Jane
Oh,
white.
you have the right page. I
Yeah.
have
No,
the
that
other one
doesn't
in front of
matter.
me.
And it says that there were about 20 families living here
Yeah.
at the same time. So it must have been also quite cramped. No,
Yes.
I mean.
Very small houses, I think.
And we can take a look inside.
Yeah.
We asked the people because there's people living here now, and I mean just people. So we asked them if we are welcome, right? And we have permission to enter. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Before-
Shall I go with you? Okay.
Yes, please.
So you can both open the door. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Ja.
Yeah. So this is the courtyard as it looks nowadays, but it's hard to imagine that there were 21 houses in the times of the Pilgrims. So as you say, it must have been cramped. And I think these houses were not so beautiful as the houses we see now. And the house of John Robinson, which was one of those houses, was in use also as a church, you could say. So
Exactly. So they came to his house to pray because for them it didn't matter. They didn't have to go to an official church.
No.
God was wherever they prayed, right?
Right.
But this courtyard, Leiden is quite famous for its courtyard, right? So this, you can enter this if you're quiet and not talking loudly as we are doing now, but I guess we have permission. But for visitors to Leiden, there's a lot of courtyards similar to this that they can visit. Are there also courtyards from that time, from the Pilgrims' time? Or?
Yeah, we have very early courtyards. We even have courtyards from the 16th century.
Yeah.
And 35 of them. So you can visit almost all these courtyards. As you say, you can enter it. It's a public place, so everybody is allowed to enter. And these courtyards were founded, most of them in the 17th century, by rich citizens, and they wanted to do something for the poor.
Okay, so they would found the courtyard, and then probably put their name on it, and then the poor families can live here, and had a free place to live, basically, right? Correct?
So they only had to pray for the benefit of the founders. So
okay, yeah, there's always a catch.
But they got free clothes and free food, and so they were taken care of,
And this was also a kind of an ideal, a religious ideal, that you would do that to give back to the community or some sort?
That was it,
And I think that on that side, I don't know, and I certainly don't know how to translate this in American, but we call it the Faliede Bagijnenkerk. And so that's over there. There was a passageway, right, during the time of the Pilgrims, and that's where they actually went to church also, right?
Yes, they could go there on Sundays. And, well, we have this beautiful magnolia, and because of the magnolia we can't see it, but we will see later on.
Yeah,
we'll
pass
there.
it. I think it's also one of the places where we meet Theo. Hopefully this time he shows up. You think that. I studied with this guy, believe me. That remains to be seen. But we'll get to that church and we'll speak to him about it.
Mm-hmm.
So for now, I think we leave the people who live here in quiet. And we go walk to the Hortus Botanicus?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah?
Follow us.
Okay. Of moet hij eerst?
Nee hoor.
Ga jij maar eerst. Gaat dat? Nee, ga jij maar.
De gerecht. That way.
Yeah, here on number 17. Yes. Oh yeah, number 17. Marieke, what can you tell about that? Well, on number 17 used to be the house of Thomas Brewer. And there will be, or is already, there will be, I think, a digital reconstruction of the house. And we talked about Thomas Brewer already at the Brewster alley.
Yeah.
So he, well, by seeing this house, you can imagine that he must have been one of the richer pilgrims. He had money. He inscribed at the university. And he was one of the ones who invested in the pilgrims. So
he was one of the investors.
Yeah, together with Brewster. Yeah. So this is the
Which way?
place where they lived.
We're going to the left, but the camera will turn around.
Ah, so we have this
Yeah.
view. All right.
Turn from here. Thank you, because
Yeah. Yeah, this is, well, you see a lot of chestnut trees now, but and a lot of flowers. Behind it is the Pieterskirk where you have been. And the instart you will see now shows us the, well, that it didn't change at all. So it's since, the 16th century, 17th century, it still looks the same.
I think this goes for this whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
If you walk these cobbled streets, almost everything is exactly like it was 400 years ago, right? So you can really imagine how it was. Thank you for
That's
waiting.
what makes Leiden so beautiful, that it didn't change that much.
We, when I was inside with Frieke, the director of the Pieterskerk, we talked briefly about the link between 3rd of October and Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And she also already started, because this is also the academic quarter of the city, right? So we also slowly started talking about, about the founding of the university and the influence that the university had on the city and vice versa. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because the origin story of the Leiden University is amazing. It's a very interesting story, because basically it was a present to the city.
It was a present from William of Orange, and that was the leader of our revolt against Spain.
Yes.
To the citizens of Leiden. And that was all after that terrible year in which we were surrounded by Spanish soldiers, and in the year in which many people died of the plague and of the because they didn't have any food. And then after that year, the Spanish soldiers were sent away. The war was over, and they were very much in need of a Protestant university.
Yes.
We didn't have a university in the Netherlands, and all the students that wanted to go to university had to go to Leuven. So we lost all those students to, well, nowadays Belgium.
It was kind of a brain drain avant la lettre.
Exactly, and we wanted to keep them, of course. So one of the first things that half year after the relief of Leiden, we got that present from William of Orange.
Because I heard, and tell me if I'm not correct, but I heard that the Leiden people had a choice.
Yeah.
Either you don't pay taxes for a year, or you get a university. Is that correct, or is that a bit of an urban myth?
It's a nice story, of course, but I don't know if it's really true. Of course, they needed a university. They had to, how do you say that? They had to have new preachers, and theology was one of the main faculties. So that is why they started
They opted for a university.
Yeah.
By the way, if the camera can see that place, that is the Latin school. So we were just talking about that. This is where Rembrandt went to school when he was a youngster, 14 years old. So during the time of the Pilgrims, and you see where they lived. This was just a 3-4 minute walk. This is where Rembrandt went to school.
And it didn't change at all. So this district and this square
exactly
didn't change that much.
Because what is this? This is also a special place, right?
Yeah, this is a very old building, one of the oldest of Leiden. And it was in fact founded by the Counts of Holland, who came to live here and gave Leiden city rights in around 1250. And they needed a prison, also a tower for defense, so they could hide whenever enemies occurred. So this building partly dates from the 13th century and was in use as a prison during the time of the Pilgrims also. So people who, well, did something wrong had to wait for their sentence inside, and then the sentences took place outside.
Exactly, out in public, right? People could just witness.
They could come and see and something else than Netflix, but you had to do something. So this was surrounded by a small canal, and people were standing over there and
witnessing the judgment being passed and everything.
Sometimes that was very, well, horrible to see.
Gruesome, yeah, of course.
Yes, sometimes people would be torn apart by 4 horses, vierendelen in Dutch, or you could be. How do you say that? On a wheel, and then every bone in your body would be broken. So
Yes.
a lot of screaming going on, I think.
A lot of screaming going
And
on.
when you died, you were brought to the gallows field, and there
Yeah.
the corpses would be hung,
Displayed
displayed.
as a sort of warning for the rest.
Right.
Okay.
So the Pilgrim children and also Rembrandt must have seen that going
They must
on.
have seen that happening.
Yeah.
There's a question.
The question is, could you explain more about 3rd of October and Thanksgiving? Could you repeat the question?
Okay, so the question is, can we explain more about the link between the 3rd of October and Thanksgiving? Could you maybe go into that a bit?
I will try. After the relief of the town by the Watergeuzen, so that was Watergeuzen is a difficult word to translate.
Yeah.
It's the rebellion army, you could say, of William of Orange.
Yes.
And those were soldiers from England, from Germany, from France, who were hired soldiers, and they liberated Leiden.
The mercenaries kind of saved our city, right?
Right. And they brought food with them, and well, people were all, of course, very happy that they finally got rid of those Spanish people. And then to give thanks, there was a celebration going on in the Pieterschurch.
Yes.
So that was on the 4th or 3rd of October.
Yes.
And every year, since 1574, still such a...
Exactly. So the town would repeat that celebration to give thanks to the relief of Leiden.
Yeah.
And the point that Jeremy Banks makes is that when the Pilgrims were living here for those 12 years, they would have witnessed those celebrations every 3rd of October because they were living next to the Pieterskerk. So they would have seen people going into the church for praying, but also people sharing bread, breaking bread together, everything. So this is why he claims that this was kind of formed the basics of what they later turn into the Thanksgiving. Now we don't know if it's actually true, but here in Leiden people like to believe that it is totally true.
Yeah, and it's also a little bit related to saying thanks for the first harvest
Of course, yes. There's more Thanksgiving.
After that harsh winter. So you could think, well, that the relation is based on truth.
Exactly. So for that person asked the question, we hope that is clear. And if not, I can really recommend reading one of Jeremy Banks's books because there's a lot of information about how things in Leiden influenced the Pilgrims, influences that then they themselves later took to America. But back to the university, because we're approaching the university. So the city of Leiden was granted this university, right?
Yeah.
And it did so much for this city. It had very famous Rembrandt van Rijn went to the university later, but also some Pilgrims, right?
Yeah, well, what we know of is that Thomas Brewer was inscribed at the university. John Robinson followed some of the discussions going on at the university.
And Brewster taught English to Dutch students through Latin, right?
That's what he did.
So they used Latin to communicate to each other. So he taught English at the Leiden University. So so it is a place that I mean it's such an important place for Leiden local history, but it also plays a role in the history of the Pilgrims.
Yeah. Well, we already talked about the motto of the university while we were walking through town, and this is what it says: that the name of the university, Academia Lugduno Batavorum, it must be, and then the motto, Praesidium Libertatis.
The seat of liberty.
The seat of liberty,
Yes.
and well, that,
Is there a relationship between the Leiden University and the U.S. University?
The U.S. University?
Universities in the U.S.
I mean, many. I know. I mean, I don't. We can maybe. Sorry. The question is there a relationship between Leiden University and universities in the U.S.? Definitely. I don't know. There's a lot of faculties at Leiden University. We have bioscience. There's a medical faculty. There's a famous law faculty. There's humanities faculty, and they all are very internationally oriented. We have a lot of American students also studying here in Leiden. So I'm absolutely sure there's a lot of individual lines between, for example, universities in Boston and Leiden. But maybe we can ask somebody at the Hortus if they have a link with the US. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
So wonderful to be here.
Well, welcome to the Hortus Botanicus.
Thank you so much.
And you too?
Thank you. Well, yeah.
If you would like to do it, please.
Okay,
yes.
shall I do the interview, Carla?
That's okay.
Would
You do what
agree?
you want. Yeah,
Okay.
it's okay. I brought all the Doneus, and we'll see.
Yeah, well, Carla, very nice meeting you again.
Very
we
nice.
know each other.
Welcome to us
already, but not in this connection.
No.
So the first thing I want to ask you is: did the Pilgrims, when they were in Leiden, see the botanical gardens as we can see it nowadays?
We are not quite sure, because in those days they did not write so very much, but we think, as they lived quite close to the Hortus Botanicus, that they have been here. The Hortus has been founded in 1590 and created, planted in 1594, so when they came here in 1609, the garden was already 15 years old and fully planted. So for them, it was interesting. They could make a nice walk. They could see medicinal plants and get an idea, could we take these to America on our trip or could we use them on the ship? And they could talk to the professors here, because it was not a botanic garden, it was a medicinal garden. Yes. So the professors were doctors and they could talk about diseases, what helps and so on. And they could see the plants. Maybe they look the same as they do at the other side of the sea. So it was quite interesting for them.
So they must have been here.
I think they have been here, quite sure. And the garden looked exactly as it looks now. This is a recreation made in 2009. That was 400 years after the death of our first director, the hortiprefectus, Carolus Clusius.
Yes, of whom we have a statue
that's
somewhere, but it's not. Oh,
That's
it's around the
just
corner.
yeah.
Okay, because there is an instart, but I don't know if Marlijn. Well, you know, we have a drawing of the botanical gardens from the days of
the early years.
The early years, but I can't reach out to see if we can have the instart.
Well, maybe you can
perhaps
do
they
that
will do that
later.
while we are talking.
There's a very nice print from 1610, the Wodanus print, and there you see also the enclosure and people hanging over it. And I like that very much.
Yes, because they admired it so much.
Yes.
I think I still see people do that.
That's right.
When the fence is closed.
That's right. Yeah.
But it's so beautiful to see. So do you think that these flowers which we see blooming now were the same flowers?
Yeah. It is an exact copy as the garden looked in, well, let's say 1594 when it was created. We have old maps and we have old plant lists, so we could recreate the garden exactly, an exact copy.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
So everybody who visits Leiden should come over to see the botanical gardens. And there is an exposition going on as well that is a little bit related to the Pilgrims, isn't
we
it?
have made an exhibition, and it's more panels in the garden, but our problem is nobody is allowed to enter the garden. But the panels are already standing there, and we hope to open the 1st of June, like all the other Dutch museums, so people can see it. But it is virtual. You can see it on your computer. It's real simple, and it is about the Pilgrims. And I have some booklets there. You can take them if you want. And you Google Hortus Leiden, and then you find our a page, and then you click on exhibition, and then you have it on your screen, and you can leave through the whole thing, so you can already see it at home.
Okay, well, that's what our viewers are doing right now at home as well. So I think they have to do that when they're interested in the botanical gardens. And who isn't, because it's so beautiful. And Carla, what what intrigues me always is that there is such a very nice old tree, which has been cut down a little bit now, but it's the oldest tree of
the Hortus.
The Hortus, isn't it?
And our head gardener
Yeah.
here, he knew the tree. It's a golden rain, a laburnum, planted by Clusius and by him in 1601.
So that is why you are dressed so beautifully. So you have helped plant it.
Yeah, he helped.
Okay.
Because Clusius was already an old gentleman when he came here. He came here in October 1593, 67 years old. So what? Retiring. He started a new career and wrote books also when he was in Leiden. So he was too old to dig a garden, and he was a gentleman from lower nobility in the northern part of France, and a gentleman is not going on his knees for a plant. So he had a gardener. First he had Dirk Oudgaardszoon Kluit, an apothecary from Delft, and Kluit was only allowed to come here if he brought his own plant collection, what he did. So we made the garden in 1594, finished in 1 year. Yeah, okay.
Well, that's very quick.
And after Kluit died after 3 years, 1598. Very sorry, because the gentlemen went on together very well. Kluit died, and then we got him as our gardener. So you see.
So everything worked out fine.
Yeah. And a gardener, what we called much later hortulanus, gardener. So he is my old predecessor. I was the hortulanus last century.
Yeah, and
so he's
for
my
a long
grandfather.
Time. So there is a relation.
You didn't know that.
And you are a little bit related to Carolus Clusius as well, of course, huh?
No,
not really, but I mean, well.
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, a little bit. Can you tell us something about the tulip? Because always everybody wants to know about the tulip, and everybody thinks that the tulip comes from Amsterdam.
That's true, American, and they start to sing the very famous song "Tulips from Amsterdam."
But they don't come from Amsterdam.
No, absolutely not.
No.
And when you ask Dutch people, I always ask on excursion, where do you think the tulip came from? They say Turkey. No, they came via Turkey. You can find tulips in the wild in Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan. I've been there once and walked almost on the tulips, what was very difficult.
Yeah.
There were so many. And a clever merchant on the Silk Road brought them on camelback to Turkey, a very rich city, Constantinople. And we know that they were already grown commercially in Turkey in the 12th century. And Clusius had heard about the tulip. He had seen some in a rich banker's garden in Augsburg in Germany, but nothing happened with those tulips. He saw them, and when he saw something, he wanted to have it.
Have it, yeah.
So he worked in the 1570s in Vienna for the Emperor of Austria. Maximilian II, and that was a very broad-minded Renaissance emperor. And his ambassador, Monsieur Auger Ghislain de Busbecq, also Flemish, French Flemish, like Clusius, got the order to bring tulips for Professor Clusius. And there Clusius received them. And when he came here in October 1593, he had in his luggage tulips.
So, what did he do with it?
Plant here.
He planted it here?
He waited, and we think that he has planted them somewhere, because in 93 there were no, there was no garden.
No.
And you cannot leave them lying around for a year, because then they are dried out. So when the garden was made, he planted them in the Hortus Botanicus.
And is it in the special part?
No, that is very strange. In the special part are bulbs, and the tulips are everywhere else. I think that he already had an idea. You couldn't grow tulips year after year on the same spot.
Right.
That was what they forgot a little bit after his death. So they planted them always in the same soil. And then you get those beautiful broken tulips, flamed tulips, that created the tulip fever in Holland. And also when they stay longer in the same spot, they become baroque in shape. They didn't know it's a virus.
It's a virus, huh?
But they couldn't see virus. They had no microscopes.
No.
They were later in that century. And virus you can see with electronic microscopes. How long are they?
No,
These here.
Not so long.
After the Second World War.
Right. So it's all about viruses today.
It's
huh?
viruses. Yeah. It's all,
But it created very
never
beautiful
something new.
tulips. No. Okay. And what is the book you have with you?
Dit is the book. Dit is the kruidenboek, the herbal by the Flemish plantsman Dodoens, Rembert Dodoens, Dodonaeus, and Clusius and Dodonaeus knew each other. They worked together in Vienna again. And he made it a big herbal.
Yeah.
And in this herbal, printed in 1554, there are already American plants.
That's interesting.
Corn, maize, mais.
Can you show us something?
Yeah,
Shall I take the microphone, or is it okay like this? Yeah.
This is not the original copy.
Okay.
Can you take it?
Yeah, I can take it. If you wait a minute, let's do it like this. I will take it, and I will show it to the
plant.
camera.
Yeah, this
Like
plant is corn. When you look good, you see it's corn. It was named Turkish corn when something was from very far and they didn't know exactly from where. They named it Turkish. So this is Turkish corn.
Okay.
And there are some, maybe you can find another one. Let me see. Beans. The beans that we eat, spersiebonen, and the beans that you cut in pieces. Haricot vert, that sort of, is all American. And he had it in his book, 1554. And there are more, maybe. There's also...
Is this also the book, Carla, which they
took this?
Yeah.
We are sure that the Pilgrims had a herbal book on the boat and in America, and that was the herbal book by Dodonaeus.
And this is the facsimile?
This is a facsimile. The original is in the university library. And I cannot get it.
Nee.
It's too expensive and maybe too fragile.
Yeah, I think so.
Here, pumpkins. Pumpkins are American. And you had three famous food plants in America. The three sisters. The long, tall sister was maize, corn. The big, round, short sister was pumpkins. And the middle sister were the beans.
Okay.
And that's very good food. So that's what they ate. And
they ate, yes.
More things, but those are the three famous sisters.
Could it be that they also took it with them on the boat to eat? Because they had to eat something, or
no.
Don't know.
I don't know what they brought. It's very difficult. Maybe some other corn, because they were not yet food crop here.
Yep,
they had what we call those broad beans, but these are Phaseolus, the American ones, and Vicia faba. That is the European one, from more eastern part, China, India. And you can dry them easily. You can dry all those beans easily. So it's very good food.
Right.
Very good staple.
Okay. It's very interesting, Carla. Yeah. So thank you for bringing this book.
Well,
is there anything else you want to tell the viewers about the botanical gardens?
The most beautiful place in Leiden.
Well, I can agree, because that's what we see today with the beautiful sunshine. Okay.
Well, it was originally intended to be a medicinal garden, but Clusius was a plant collector. So we know that after a few years, only 25% of the plants are real medicinal plants, and the rest were new introductions from all parts of the world. The tulip, the peony, some of the roses, the irises that you can see there. So all kinds of things. But still medicinal plants. Digitalis, it's poisonous. But when you know how to use it, it's heart medicine, is still used. So that sort of thing.
Okay, and it was public. I mean, everybody could come, not only students,
No,
but
it has always been open.
Well, that's good.
It was what they called a public garden. That's not meant that it was open for the public. It was paid by public money, taxes.
Okay.
Because we were a university botanic garden paid by the government.
Okay, good. Thank you so much.
We have a question from the audience.
Ah.
Until when is the exposition here looking to see?
As far as I know, until the end of October. So we hope still to get many visitors. But yeah, we are restricted in the amount of visitors we can have every day. So how it will go, we have no idea. They will talk about it next Monday. But yeah, we hope that we will be open a long time. We have books for the public, and you can take some if you want.
Okay.
And people are welcome, we hope. But they have to read our website.
Okay.
Like I said, you Google Hortus Leiden, and then you can see we are open.
Okay, so everybody, let's go to the Botanical Garden.
Yeah,
when we
not
are
too many.
open again. Not too many.
And
okay.
you have to order tickets by email or whatever.
Yeah, they can read it all on the website.
They
I
can
think.
read it
Okay.
later all on the website.
Well, Carla, thank you so much for having us here and for this very nice interview. And
well, thank you.
We hope
It was
to see you
great
again
fun to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
To tell people about the most beautiful garden in Leiden.
Right, in the world. Huh?
No.
Okay, and thank you so much.
Okay.
Gardener. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
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 So after this wonderful intermezzo, garden intermezzo, back in the street, I think we had a viewer's question in the meantime about the university. They ask, are there any other pilgrims that went to university? As far as I know,
Really
that was
describe.
not the case, right? I mean, it was a theology faculty where John Robinson, he was taking place, he partook in the Arminian debate, so that would have a academic aspect to it. And then Thomas Brewer, of course.
Right.
And then Brewster taught English to Dutch students through Latin. But any of the other pilgrims, I don't know if they went to. I don't think
sure.
so.
Most of the pilgrims didn't belong to that class.
Elite class. They worked in the cloth
and
industry.
Weavers and cloth industry. So perhaps, I don't know if Suzanne knows more about it, perhaps can answer this question.
I think it's safe to say that we know that they were not. I mean, and this is maybe, especially this place in Leiden, you see the difference between kind of the class difference, right?
Yeah.
Is this the
this is the Nonnensteeg.
Okay.
This is a place where some of the pilgrims also lived. So not at the Rapenburg, because the Rapenburg, this canal, is of course the most beautiful canal, in the world, I always like to say, but in Leiden. And you can see these houses, well, they belonged to regents, to professors, to printers.
Exactly.
So really...
so the rich, upper class people, they lived on the canal. I heard that even in the Golden Age, this was already considered in travel guides in the 17th century. They already written that this was the most beautiful canal of Europe.
Yeah.
And then in these little streets, in the side streets, this is where
the
workers of the town lived,
as is the
including the
Kloksteeg,
pilgrims.
of course, where we have been before.
Exactly,
It's
there.
also a side street from the Rapenburg. And still these houses, well, these are the most expensive houses in Leiden, with nice gardens and not all so nice as the botanical gardens, but well, many of them have nice gardens.
No, these are the houses where still until this day, this is where the famous Leiden people live, right?
Where
and the
everybody
professors
wants to live,
exactly. So that really didn't change that much.
No, but this canal already dates from the 14th century. I mean, this is really a very old part of town.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Yeah.
We will pick it up after. There is Theo. We'll meet Theo, and he's going to tell us about this place, why we are also reconstructing digitally this place.
Okay.
And we'll catch up and then walk to the gardens again. Theo.
Hi, Michael.
Great of you to join us. A little mishap, but there you are.
Such a coincidence. I meet you here on the street.
Always.
Just walking around here.
For the viewers, does it look like we know each other? Yes, we both studied here in Leiden. Haven't seen each other for 12 years, and then all of a sudden, there we are.
Yes, if only that would be true.
Why are we here? Why are we on this place? Are we standing in the right place? You look worried.
Yes?
No, okay. Why are we standing in this place?
Probably because... you asked me to, to be standing here. No. I'm the director of a foundation. And what we basically do is we build 5D time machines. That means that we make, with virtual reality, we build a surrounding. And you can look around with your mobile telephone or online. And you can actually see what a place looked like in the past. So we build it in highly realistic in virtual reality. You can look around and you can see all the places and you can see all the buildings, and then you can tick and tip on things, and you can get information about the people that used to live here, the buildings that are standing here, the events that happened here. So when the entire story of the Pilgrims came along, we figured how great would it be to build a time machine that you can actually go back in time and see what they saw in 1620.
400 years ago.
400 years ago.
And two of those places we've already seen. Ariella showed us the first place, the church, Onze Lieve Vrouwekerk. Yeah. And then later the Broadway of Leiden, Breestraat. Why is this such an important place for you to also digitally reconstruct?
Because, well, what you often need to do when you think, okay, what would I want to show is a place that has stories, that bear stories in it. So this is the great thing about heritage, that you walk around in a spot and you see and you look and you think, wow, what would have happened here? And the funny thing is that even though we're standing in a very old city and it's an amazing evening and it looks all fantastic, it actually looked very different in 1620 because fronts change, buildings change, fashions change. But in 1620, right at the other side of the canal, there was the so-called Church of the Bagwins. Now, the Bagwins is an old semi-monastic order of women that were living in communities, and they obviously were Catholic. And this goes back to the 14th, 15th century. And they were living there. And when the city became Protestant, all the buildings were seized, and the church became the church that was standing there became a university building. But later on, with all the turmoils and all the problems with religion, the government didn't want people to have their meetings and their masses at home. So they said, okay, well, you can use that church, which is a former Bagwin church, so please, by all means, use it. So that
and for the viewers, we were just in the courtyard of the Pilgrims, Pesijnhof, where they used to live. Yeah. And there was this old tree, so you couldn't see it, but that actually pointed towards the spot where the Pilgrims went to church on every Sunday, right?
Yeah, every Sunday. And the fun part is that still nowadays it's a university building. And this is one of the great examples that you need to know what you're looking at. So when you look at the current building, this is where the council of the university resides.
Yes.
And it's a 19th century building, or an early 20th century building. But behind, the church is still there. So if you would walk around the building, you could actually see the choir of the church. Yeah. So how great is it to actually stand here and look around in the past and see what it looked like?
Exactly. So you stand here, you see how it looks now, obviously, and then you have this app, this thing that you're building, and you hold it up and you can literally see the change in front of your eyes, how it would have looked if you were standing here 400 years ago.
Exactly.
I think we have a Marlijn, can you roll some... Oh, it's already seen. Sorry.
So, and what's maybe interesting to tell, what we showed on the image, and I suppose the viewers can see that by now, is that we're not done yet with the reconstruction of this part of the city. So we're still doing the research, and it's a lot of research because, as I said,
sounds tedious. Every little stone and every...
Tedious. I'm an historian.
Oh, of course, sorry.
It's the most fantastic thing you could possibly do.
It sounds... it's quite intense.
It's very intense.
You need to have every little brick and mortar you want to reconstruct.
Yeah, and the fun thing, it is a reconstruction. That means that you never... when you go back this far in time, you never really know 100% what it looked like.
Exactly.
But you can do an educated guess, and sometimes you actually do know it. So what we do, we work as a foundation. We work together with, for instance, Leiden Heritage, that has the archives and that have people that are very familiar with the local architecture, and so they help us. And we do a lot of research ourselves. So we use old maps and old city views, these bird-eye views over the city. But also...
do you also use sources, like somebody explaining how a building would have looked? Maybe like descriptions? I don't know, like...
Yeah, you don't really have that.
No.
What you do very often have is that in the 19th century, when the awareness of heritage became more important, people started to actually paint and sketch the buildings before often they were demolished or changed. So actually that is a very good source. We also use that.
Okay.
And sometimes we really use sort of very specialized research. For instance, well, I don't know whether the camera can see it, but if you take a look at this house, and you see the front is much later. But you can see at the back, you can see the yellow wall.
Yeah.
And that probably means, if you take a proper look, that they changed the front because fashion changes and
exactly.
But the house at the back is still the original
so
one.
the side of the building, you're looking at the old house.
Exactly.
But in walking the streets, you see this new facades, basically.
So
you're trying to peel it like an onion. You peel layer after layer after layer.
And sometimes that actually means that you, for instance, you do, with a very difficult word, so-called dendrochronological research. That means that you take a look at the growing rings of old wood. So you take a sample of the old wooden structure of the house, which often actually go back to the Middle Ages. And then you can see from what period they are, and that gives you an indication of the age of a house. So that we do that for every house, but then we virtually reconstruct it digitally, and it's a puzzle, really.
And why would you say, I asked the same question to Ariela, why would you say this is important to do? Especially in a commemorative year like this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we are commemorating this history, the shared history. Why is it important that we, in such a year, do projects such as these, so that we can really kind of figure out how it... What is your the ultimate goal?
The ultimate goal for us as a foundation is really to raise awareness of the past. To actually tell stories. Places have stories, as I said earlier, places have stories in them. So what we try to do is to make people fascinated. Wow, I can actually look in the past. This is great. And these places lead to larger stories. So for instance, we have the university, we have the church where the Pilgrims used to go. Just around the corner, Thomas Brewster used to live. So it becomes all very concrete. And you walk around in this place and you think, well, these people actually lived here. I can get the information. And this is the interesting thing. If I want to know more about the religious turmoils of the 17th century. Or about the university, I can click on.
You can really go in depth by going through those layers.
Yeah, so what you basically create is a sort of time machine, an encyclopedia, and ultimate tour guides all in one. And you can use it, and the good news is for the Americans and the English, that you can actually do it on your computer, so you don't have to come here. But when you're here, you use your telephone, and you look around, and you see so you really become aware of the stories and the importance of a specific place.
What I really like about this particular project is, and we really didn't discuss that, but the Pilgrims didn't leave from Leiden, they left from Delfshaven, which is now in Rotterdam.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was mentioned a couple of times, where next to the water. You are also going into places on the route from Leiden to Delfshaven and then Delfshaven itself.
Yeah,
so this is basically a project that extends way beyond Leiden.
Actually, the original idea when we started the whole project and we were starting to work together with Leiden Heritage was, okay, can we recreate the first stage of their journey?
Yeah.
And that goes from Leiden to Rotterdam, Delfshaven, which is nowadays a part of Rotterdam. And then we figured, okay, if we reconstruct a number of the most important places here in Leiden, that tells the story of where they lived, what it looked like, the stories of the city, of their daily life. But then it would also be interesting to, well, if you take a look there, you can see a bridge. Yeah. And that's the beginning of the Vliet.
We'll get there after visiting Leiden Heritage.
Yes. And so that's the start of when the canals become channels. And from here they go all the way directly to Rotterdam. So what we've done, we're going to build a sort of time machine. So on several spots in the countryside, outside of the city walls of Leiden. Or you come by The Hague and you can see the city, you can see all the buildings of where the Estates General and the States of Holland used to gather. We come by, for instance, Delft, the famous spot where Vermeer later would
The
paint
view on
his
Delft.
famous view on Delft.
Exactly.
And then we arrive in Delfshaven. And all those places you can look what they looked like, or that you can see what landscape and the Dutch, the Holland looked like in the 17th century.
It's wonderful. And you're still working on it, right? You're doing the research, you're making everything to be technically applicable. Can you promise when this pandemic is over and Americans are coming over to Holland, or people from the UK are coming over, or people from other places in Holland coming to visit, that it's going to be done?
Yeah, it should be online on the beginning of August.
Yeah.
So that's our aim, and we're on track, I think. So that should be okay.
Where
so before
can people
actually
find it?
via your site, the site of the Mayflower 400, obviously. And there is an address, it's called Canals 5D. So the 5D is five-dimensional, as I explained. And maybe if you allow me, because we're doing research what the Speedwell actually looked like, the ship that they were sailing from Delfshaven towards England. And there are many pictures of it, but the pictures are all incorrect or 19th century. So we actually don't really know what it looked like. So we've done some research.
Like the one we saw, the painting by Willards in the Lakenhal Museum.
Yeah.
There's the Speedwells on it, but it's a romanticized image, of course.
Yeah, probably. So we're not entirely... So we think there are many ship types, and we think it's the so-called Pinas, which is a 16th century shipping type. But if there's any information or people know more about it or have done research what shipping type it was, we would love to know that.
Ah, okay,
Why?
cool.
Because we're going to reconstruct also Delfshaven, so you can look around. And we want in the harbor. We want people to show all the ships that were lying there. So not only the fisher boats or the ferries that you can find, but also the Speedwell itself, waiting for them to leave.
So for any maritime specialists out there watching, if you have any information about the whereabouts or how the Speedwell looked, please get in touch with Theo. No, but really, we are absolutely certain that there's a lot of people watching from historical, genealogical societies. If you have any information that could help us, please reach out to us.
Yeah.
There's a question.
So when will the digital reconstruction be ready for use remotely?
When will the digital reconstruction be ready for use remotely?
In the beginning of August.
The beginning of August.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
yes.
So this is the great thing about being a digital platform. You don't actually have to come here, and you can still enjoy the past. You can actually use this time machine.
Exactly. So you can sit in the comfort of your own home in either Colorado or in London or wherever you are, and just go and see and visit basically these places.
Which must be a bit of an absurd experience, I suppose. You're in Colorado, and all of a sudden you're
in
maybe
17th century Leiden. You would like to know that with all the streams all together, there's now 30,000 people watching. So that's also quite absurd. People we could have never hosted in this tiny city.
It's good you're only telling me now, otherwise it would have become very nervous. Yeah.
Theo, thank you so much for this wonderful information. Marlijn, I think it'll be good we walk on, but I think it'll be good if we place some links also, right? So people can go and visit all the places we've been, the Latin American Pilgrim Museum, Theo's project. So on our Facebook, we'll post a few links. Thank you so much.
See you later.
Yes, so the core stream we're having is the Mayflower 400 NL Facebook. That's the Facebook of Leiden Marketing. There's many other places at the moment that are streaming this broadcast, this tour at the moment. But this is the core one, so if you have any questions, please ask them there. If you ask them in any other of the hundreds of Facebook groups, we won't be able to see it. So please go to the Facebook stream of Mayflower 400 NL and put your question there. Yeah, and ask them now, so we can answer them. Because I think we have about half an hour left in our tour for those of you who are still clinging to the screen and maybe want to have a cup of tea or something. Marieke, we're exiting the Rapenburg, the place where the famous and rich people used to live and still live. Where are we now?
Just one thing I just wanted
please.
to tell about the Rapenburg, because I didn't tell that before, but it's perhaps nice for people to know that there is a big relationship, has always been a relationship between the House of Orange, starting with William of Orange, who gave us the university, and the university. So all the members of the House of Royal,
the royal family,
who studied in Leiden. So our king of today, Willem-Alexander, also studied in Leiden.
Yes, he lived there. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, we were sending you. Totally forgot about that.
That was just something.
Yeah, no,
people
it's
like
fun.
To know.
You could have seen his student apartment. Exactly. We are now walking towards Leiden Heritage, their building, but we're also passing a very interesting building, the stargazing building.
Stargazing building, that sounds nice.
Right?
Star Wars building.
Going to do stargazing. We're going to do stargazing.
Yeah.
Put up some new buildings. But now, can you tell us a bit about this area where we are now?
Well, it's not the most beautiful street now. I mean, a lot of
really
modern houses, a lot of student housing. That's, of course, typical for Leiden as well. Leiden of today and Leiden of, well, all the other years before, that we are a students' town. So we have a lot of students' houses, and that might be old houses, but also very
new ones.
Well, new ones. The Sterrenwacht.
The observatory.
The observatory.
Sorry, I love the word stargazing. Also, I forgot the word observatory.
We are there, finally. The observatory is part of, well, not part of the Botanical Gardens, but if you visit the Botanical Gardens, you can walk through the Botanical Gardens, and then you will end up at the Sterrenwacht.
Yeah.
And we are at the point almost from which we can see the Sterrenwacht. Sterrenwacht is a very old one, dating from 1633.
Yeah.
Belongs to the university, of course, and is still in use. It has some of the very old observatory cupolas, which sometimes are open during special occasions.
Yes.
I mean, they are part of Monuments Day, which we have, of course, once a year in Leiden, when all the monuments are open, and also the observatory takes part in that. And the Single Park, right? Marlijn reminds us of the Single Park, because the Single Park is the park surrounding Leiden, alongside the Single, and the Sterrenwacht is part of the Single Park, so people can just walk around Leiden. I think it's in total 7 kilometers.
Yeah.
The Single Park, and then
the idea of the Single Park is basically that they connected all the inner part of the Single, of the water surrounding the city.
Yeah.
And they made it now, or they're still working on it, I think, so that you can walk the entire city uninterrupted.
Yeah, that's true. There is an in-start, but I don't know if that was in the beginning of the tour, was planned in the beginning of the tour, where you see the construction of the Single Park. But what is also nice, of course, is that you can take boat trips in Leiden.
Exactly.
And if you go through the Single, you will pass the Single Park as well. So if you don't like to walk, you can pop in a boat and then visit it by that.
Well, that's the observatory for our guests. This lovely afternoon sun. I heard that it's the oldest academic observatory in the world that is still in use.
Still in use, which is very special, of course.
And on that side,
the archive.
We're going to Ariella. You've met her before. I think I see her already there.
Okay.
And Ariella, director of Leiden Heritage. Leiden Heritage also holds what is called the Pilgrim Archives, and she's going to tell us more about it. There's a lot of paper, a lot of documents, very, very special and unique documents, and I'm sure she will show us some. And then also one of the projects that Leiden Heritage is doing this year, except for the reconstruction of the heritage that we've just seen, also Theo talking about, they also have an ancestor booth. An ancestor booth where people from the States who are descendants can come to Leiden and find out more about their heritage. But Ariella will tell more about that. Ariella,
nice
good to see you again. Yes.
Well, we're at Heritage Leiden here. The building opposite me is the oldest municipal archives in the Netherlands. Does it work? And Normally, we should show everybody what's in the vaults, because that's what we are going to show people who visit here for the Pilgrim Year, so they can the documents, so they can hold the documents of their ancestors inside the vaults. That will happen. We open again on the 2nd of June, but filming a live stream doesn't work in a vault, because the vault is made of thick concrete. Actually, it has a prescription that you have to be able to withstand 2 rocket attacks in the same place.
This is how good we in Leiden guard the Pilgrim archives.
Exactly. Not to mention all the climate and whatever.
Of course.
But that means that the live stream doesn't work, because there's no Wi-Fi or whatever that goes through all that concrete. So instead of that, we will show you a little film that we made earlier, so you can see what people will see when they visit here. Welcome to Heritage Leiden. I'm Arielle Natief, the director. Let us show you around.
At the very location where the Pilgrims left Leiden for their new homes in America, Heritage Leiden is situated. This building, which is well over a century old, houses kilometers of archives, amongst which those of the city and churches of Leiden. In these archives, the Pilgrims left their traces. You can visit the Ancestor booth during the building's opening hours. Here you can browse through books, watch short movies, and explore our digitized collection on the Pilgrims. Would you like to see the real documents? That's also possible. Every visitor can take a peek into our treasure room. We will show you the most important documents, and if you wish, you can take a picture with your ancestral record. Group visits need to be booked in advance. Are you going to explore Leiden? We've made some impressive VR reconstructions to enhance your experience of the 17th century city. Even at home, you can browse through our archives. You can find all of the documents we have on the Pilgrims in our database, Pilgrim Documents Online.
Do you wish to know more about what we have to offer, like talks and group visits? You can find all the information you need on our website.
So, Ariella, we are now inside. We are standing in the Ancestors booth.
Yeah.
I think it would be nice to say, Suzanne, maybe a wave for the camera. Yeah. Suzanne, our specialist, she has been answering questions on Facebook and keeping track of all the interesting questions coming our way.
Exactly.
The Ancestors booth.
I'll explain a bit. The idea is that anybody who's interested in the Pilgrim ancestors or just generally interested in the Pilgrims can come here. They can watch a few short movies that we made on the Pilgrims on different aspects of their lives. They can use the database over there, which has all the Pilgrim documents in that we have digitized and transcribed, so you don't have to read that horrible 17th century handwriting. This map will show you the city as it was in the time of the Pilgrims, with all the pins showing you where the Pilgrims lived when we know it, because loads of them rented accommodation, and rented accommodation doesn't show up in the records. It's only ownership that shows up. Or if they come up in a court case and they have a good description of where they lived exactly. So that is where they lived. You can look again at all the digital reconstructions that you saw earlier. And because, well, we can't go into the vault, I brought one document down.
I knew you would do it.
Yes. And this is an apprenticeship agreement for, I forgot what it is, Vince Jepson, I think. And he becomes an apprentice. And because he needs a contract for that, they go to a notary. They make up a whole long contract. You see a page and a half of conditions. And they have witnesses sign it. And it says specifically in the contract that they had these witnesses because they spoke good Dutch.
Ah, look.
Because not all the Pilgrims spoke good Dutch yet. And one of those witnesses is Thomas Blossom. And he, if you look over here, is the ancestor of both the Bushes and Obama. So he is a sort of double whammy ancestor. And in fact, we put all the pilgrims who had a president as a descendant on the wall here, so you can see how they descend. And that's basically what people can do here. They can walk around here, look a bit, and then we take them up into the vault, and we show them any document of their ancestors. We got all the pilgrims in here, and all the documents that we have of them are noted on the back, and the one that's in red is the one they can hold in their own hands. And because it's very special if you hold a 400-year-old document, we make a photo of them, and they can have a commemorative photo with their ancestors' document, where they can hold the exact same page where their ancestor put down his mark.
His signature, because this is amazing. This is the original signature by the 13th great-great-grandfather of Barack Obama.
Yeah.
That's just laying around here.
Yeah, it's this one here. Sorry, this one. That's
yes,
him.
You can see here.
Here is Blossom. And actually Jonathan Brewster as well. So that's what people can do here. And as I said, we open again from the 2nd of June. We don't expect many people to come over from America just yet, but they can see the same documents next year. We'll keep them for the next few centuries.
Exactly. We'll make sure that this booth will be there once international travel can come again. Thank you so much. I think we go outside now because we are in a very special place here.
Yes, we are.
Was that a coincidence?
That is a coincidence,
right?
This was actually an archive was built here because this used to be the city walls.
Yep.
And in the 19th century, they didn't need the walls anymore, so they took down the walls, and they had all this territory that belonged to the city but wasn't built on. So when they needed to build an archive, which is a city
this is a good place because
they had a space.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what makes this so incredibly coincidental is that this Leiden heritage is based on the place where actually the pilgrims left from.
Yeah. This is the Vliet River, and that goes all the way to Delft. And in the 17th century, if you want to travel, you take a boat pulled by horses called a trekschuit. They embarked here, went through there, went all the way to Delfshaven. Then they spent a few hours being pilgrims going to church, and then they went on a bigger ship to England. And so basically this is the exact place where they lived, which also means that we put a little monument here. The mayor unveiled it in the 90s, and this is all the names of the pilgrims.
Of the Leiden pilgrims.
The Leiden pilgrims who left for America. The statue itself is made by Gert van der Woude, and it symbolizes the step from the old world into the new. And as you see the dates here, it says 1620, 1647.
Yes, why is that?
The first few pilgrims actually left in 1620, but they didn't leave all at once. So the last Leiden pilgrim to go to America finally left in 1647.
I also understood that some of the plants that are now being planted are quite special, right? It's a collaboration with the Friends of the Single Park and the Academic Gardens, the Hortus?
Yes. What happens here is, because this is such a special place, and because they want to make all the defensive works into one big park, we decided that our part of the park had to have something to do with the pilgrims. So the Friends of the Single Park planted this as a 17th century garden. The fences are the same as in New Plymouth. They planted American plants and Dutch plants. And in that way, we have a sort of different commemoration of the Pilgrims here.
A flowery commemoration.
Exactly.
I think this wraps it up, right?
Thank you.
I think I think with the end of the Pilgrims' time in Leiden, we've also reached. Is that my camera? We've also reached the end of our tour and broadcast. Thanks to all of our wonderful guides. They're there at the cross street. Guys, thank you so much for. Thanks a lot to the crew, everybody that helped us today, and thanks to our sponsors and partners, of course, and of course, thanks to our audience, people in Netherlands, people in UK, in US. It's absolutely been great to have you here, to have this collective effort in these times of isolation. Don't go just yet, because we want to leave you with something very special. I already said it in the Pieters Church. We have a wonderful piece of art for you. I told you about one of the reasons why this commemoration is so important to us as a city is because of the relevance in the here and now. And it's absolutely wonderful to see how the themes of history inspire artists in this day and age. Caspar Vase, we already mentioned him. He's a famous contemporary artist in Leiden. For those of you from the US and UK, you might know him. He also exhibits in London, in New York, and Miami. But ever since he was young, he was born in this place, he's from this place. Ever since he was young, he was captivated by the idea that these great painters came from the same city that he was a young boy in. And so his parents took him to Rijksmuseum to see The Night's Watch by Rembrandt, and he came home and he started painting it on his walls. And he's been a painter and photographer ever since. This year is about freedom. It's also 75 years ago that the World War II ended. And of course, in Leiden, we have the Leiden400 commemoration. So Caspar, inspired by the themes of freedom and tolerance, he made a stunning piece in the Pieterskerk with the help of his friends in dance and in film and in music. And with that piece, I won't say too much about it, you have to see it. We want to leave you with some reflection and contemplation. And for now, we wish you a lot of good health.
I have one more thing.
Oh.
Because when visitors are coming to Leiden, they can do the pilgrim route themselves. Just so you know. And we also have a Rembrandt route, so you can see all the locations we've went to and all the different stories that have been told there. So I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. Good that you tell us this. We want to leave you. We wish you good health. Marlijn, a special thanks to you. Thanks for making this possible.
Thank you for presenting.
I would like to hug you, but
Yeah,
that's not but absolutely wonderful that you organized this. And of course, we would really like to see you in Leiden one day. And for now, let's watch the work by Caspar Vase.